meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this point, I'd like to invite Stan Bowling, the planning director, to come down and lead us in the invocation, and Commissioner Bob Slaughter will lead us in the pledge. Would everyone please rise? Good morning, Stan.
Good morning. Let's pray. Lord God, this morning we admit that sometimes we're too busy or distracted or worse, and many times we're not sure exactly what we're doing, but we're doing. We've put you on the agenda first this morning. It's about 45 seconds. We realize we need you throughout this entire day and this week. So we ask that you would remind us of you. And we know in your word it says that you have prepared good works for us to do ahead of time. And we ask only today that we would in fact recognize that, and we would perform those good works for your glory. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Today is a special day for someone up here. I believe Commissioner Flesher, is it not your birthday today?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chairman.
Well, a very happy birthday to you.
Big 5-1.
Ooh, good for you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as presented. Takes us to proclamations and presentations. We have 5 or 6 presentations here. What I'd like to do, with the board's permission, is we'll take presentations A through F, and then if anyone wants pictures, we'll take a short break, get all the picture taken out of the way, and then we'll do the final presentation, G, after the picture taken, if that's
so moved.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I don't know that it matters necessarily, but I know that the presentation G is going to take a little bit of time. Perhaps you would like to, and this is with your indulgence in the boards, just go ahead and take care of the consent agenda and anything that's not to be pulled for discussion, but then come back to G. That way, any staff we have waiting on the consent agenda.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
You follow my logic?
Yeah, you want to move consent agenda up before F or 5G?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
yes.
I'm good with that. Any discussion? All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, so we will move consent agenda up to follow 5F. Great. All right, so the first presentation is a proclamation promoting the spring 2010 Mighty Mite baseball season. Commissioner Wheeler, the old Southpaw himself, will be delivering this one. And who we got? We got
our recreation
Cliff,
department.
Mike, Bill. Come on down.
This is a proclamation promoting the spring 2010 Mighty Mite baseball season. And it makes me think of my son when he was about 5 years old, resting on his glove out in left field, laying down and picking clovers. Whereas recreational activities and issues experience provided opportunities for people to live, grow, and develop into contributing members of society while providing outlets for physical activities, socialization, and learning the individual skills of teamwork. And whereas this year there are over 350 youth playing in Indian River County Recreation Department baseball programs. Experiences obtained through sports such as baseball touch the lives of individuals, families, groups, and the entire community, which positively impact upon the social, economic, and health quality of our community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed they change that. Therefore, be it promoted by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that the opening day of spring 2010 Mighty Mite baseball season is scheduled for Friday, April 16th, 2010, and all citizens are encouraged to be present at 6 p.m. for the opening pitch at the South County Regional Park at 800 20th Avenue, Vero Beach, and signed by all the county commissioners today. So, would you like to say something?
Play ball.
Yeah, play ball. Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Redstone, Assistant Director of Recreation. We want to thank you for recognizing the start of our youth baseball program. We have over 27 teams that are going to be hitting the field this weekend, and both Friday night and Saturday morning, with the T-ballers and the 4- and 5-year-olds, and all the way up to the 9- and 12-year-olds in youth baseball. So we're looking forward to it. They've been working hard. We've got volunteer coaches out there that have been working with the kids, and I think everybody's really excited for that opening pitch to kick off the season. So again, we encourage everyone to come out. It's free to the public. You can come out and have a hot dog and take in a good game. It's fun to watch those youngsters out there playing baseball, and some future stars maybe too. You never know. So again, thank you, and we encourage everybody to come out Friday night, the 16th, South County Regional Park for our first pitch. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to work with. We'll get him, Mike. Southpaw, truly.
Next is a presentation of a proclamation honoring the recipients of the 2010 Dan K. Richardson Award, Dr. Hugh McChrystal and Mrs. Anne Marie McChrystal. Commissioner Fleischer will be making the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I have the distinct privilege and honor of presenting this proclamation to two fine representatives of this county, and I would like to call them up to the podium. Are they here?
Yeah.
Freddie? Freddie, I see you brought an entourage too. Want to all come up?
I'm anxious.
There we go. Now we have the team in order. Welcome. This is a proclamation honoring the recipients of the 2010 Dan K. Richardson Award, presented to Dr. Hugh McChrystal and Mrs. Anne Marie McChrystal. Whereas the Dan K. Richardson Humanitarian Award was established to identify and publicly recognize those citizens who actively pursue opportunities to improve the quality of life for all who live and work in Indian River County. Whereas this year, the 5th annual Dan K. Richardson Humanitarian Award is presented to Dr. Hugh McChrystal and Mrs. Anne Marie McChrystal for their lifelong commitment to the philanthropic endeavors of which over 30 years have directly benefited the residents of Indian River County. Whereas Dr. McChrystal acted as Chief of Staff of the Indian River Memorial Hospital for 24 years and helped create the Indian River Hospital District Board of Trustees to uniquely address the increasing number of indigent patients and guided the medical community in its growth and professional development. And whereas Mrs. McChrystal was a founding member of the Visiting Nurses Association, the VNA, and served as the chairman for the association and Hospice Foundation for 19 years. In addition, Mrs. McChrystal served as the campaign chairman for the VNA Hospice House, which successfully raised $5 million for the construction of the facility. And whereas throughout the years, the McChrystals have volunteered their time and resources to numerous community services, including the Riverside Theater, the Indian River Medical Center, the Senior Resource Association, the Citizen Scholarship Foundation, the Children's Home Society, and the American Cancer Society, as well as the Indian River Community Foundation. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners that Dr. Hugh McChrystal and Mrs. Anne Marie McChrystal, recipients of the Dan K. Richardson Humanitarian Award, be honored and emulated for their exemplary contributions to our community. Duly adopted this 13th day of April 2010, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Thank you.
Very much.
Doctor? Would you like to say something? Please.
First of all, I want to thank the Gifford Youth Activity Center for this wonderful, wonderful honor. This is a prestigious honor after a wonderful gentleman. And as far as Hugh and I, we do what we do because we love what we do, and thank you all so very much.
The vice choice for the speaker. Vice choice for the speaker.
Yes, but very wise choice, and thank you for everything that you do for this community. Thank you. And we'll continue.
Very well read.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Boy, you get a talk of that.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Mr. Wolfoff would like to say a few words.
Okay, good morning, Freddie.
Good morning. Excuse my voice. We did bring along with us some of the staff and board members. We have Mr. Carter Hopkins, who's our foundation chair, Ms. Angela Perry, our executive director, and Mr. Bob Lamont, our foundation executive director. So we come once again to say once again, you can see that Indian River County is great because they have so many people that pour into our community. Many times we look at our own community and we say we're doing okay, but when you go outside your community and see other communities, you come back and say we're doing great. And the reason why we're doing great is because people like Dr. Hugh McChrystal and Ms. Ann McChrystal and others who have poured into this Indian River County community. So we want to say thank you for joining with us in recognizing this great couple for the magnificent work that they're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Fred, again, just a reminder, we'll be taking a little break here. You can get pictures if you want. Okay. Takes us to the next presentation of a proclamation recognizing April 11 through 17, 2010 as National Telecommunicators Week. Commissioner Fletcher will present this, and Sheriff Moore Sandy Fox will be receiving this. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a great honor of presenting this proclamation for National Telecommunicators Week. I do see some other telecommunicators here in the audience. With your indulgence, I'd like to see them come on up as well to receive this. We have some of our great dispatchers here in Indian River County to represent and accept this proclamation. This is a proclamation recognizing April 11 through 17, 2010 as National Telecommunicators Week. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas public safety dispatches are the first contact our residents have with an emergency service. And whereas public safety dispatches are the vital link of our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities and providing them information and ensuring their safety. Whereas public safety dispatches are more than a calm and reassuring voice at the end of the phone. They are the unseen first responders. They are knowledgeable and highly trained individuals who work closely with our police, fire, and medical personnel. And whereas Indian River County Sheriff's Office public safety dispatchers answered 65,400 911 calls and 214,738 administrative calls for the year of 2009. They dispatched 150,627 calls for service for law enforcement and 22,136 for fire rescue. And whereas public safety dispatchers daily serve the public in countless ways without recognition by their beneficiaries of their services. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Indian River Board of County Commissioners that the Board recognize the week of April 11th through April 17th as the National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our community and our residents safe. Duly adopted this 13th day of April 2010, signed by all 5 county commissioners.
Thank you, and good morning again, and thank you, Commissioner Fletcher, for those kind words. You know, our goal at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office is to be the best agency on the Treasure Coast and ultimately the best agency on the East Coast of the state of Florida, and we're well on our way. And these ladies beside me are an indication of why we are on our way. Just some of the numbers that you mentioned, Commissioner Fletcher, if you think about 180 911 calls a day, absolutely remarkable volume, 588 administrative calls, 150,000 law enforcement dispatches. Now, as you know, and Commissioner Wheeler knows, after every dispatch, there's usually dozens of transmissions following each particular case. An additional 22,000 fire rescue calls dispatched. And again, after every one of those fire trucks are dispatched and ambulances, there's dialogue or continued transmissions. So with that, I say thank you. Ms. Sandy Fox is here to talk and recognize her folks. I can also tell you, gentlemen, that several months ago we instituted critical incident training within our dispatch center. And what that does is the first on the Treasure Coast for these ladies and men that dispatch emergency services calls that are specially trained to identify and recognize and discern symptoms from that 911 caller prior to a deputy being dispatched to the scene. So there's already a think tank going on prior to that being dispatched. We're very thankful for that. I welcome Ms. Sandy Fox.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
On behalf of Indian River County Sheriff's Office Public Safety Dispatchers, we'd like to thank you for recognizing us this week during National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. As you're aware, our job is not an easy one. Not only do we dispatch law enforcement and fire rescue, but we also provide pre-arrival instructions on every single medical call, regardless of the severity for the entire county. It's an honor and a privilege to be recognized this week, not only for our operators, but for also all telecommunicators across the nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I'd just like to build on that, because I'll tell you, I honestly believe that the most difficult job in the sheriff's office is a 911 operator, more so than corrections, more so than law enforcement or the other civilian personnel. What they go through, their training, sitting in a room with no windows all day long, but the thought process that they have to go through to deal with situations that aren't visible over the phone, they do an absolutely outstanding job. And even when I was being critical of the sheriff that I ran against at one time, I still had nothing but praise for the 911 operators at the sheriff's office. You do an outstanding job, and you got to be really a special person. I think it's almost like a calling, like a school teacher, a police officer, or whatever. But anyway, thank you for being there and the service you provide.
Thank you. We'll continue to provide the same level of service for as long as we can. You know, that is our job, is to protect and help these people through a crisis.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming up. Sure.
Next, we have a presentation of a proclamation designating April 18th through April 24th, 2010 as National Cleaning for a Reason Week. Commissioner Bob Solari will be presenting this, and Tom Heberon, the president of Beachland Cleaning, will be the recipient. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Haveron.
Good morning.
It's my pleasure today to read a proclamation designating April 18th through April 24th, 2010 as National Cleaning for a Reason Week. Whereas Beachland Cleaning Service is a proud partner in the national nonprofit organization Cleaning for a Reason Foundation, and whereas the Cleaning for a Reasons Foundation's mission is to recruit cleaning companies across the country to provide free professional house cleaning services to improve the lives of women undergoing treatment for cancer. Since 2007, the foundation has donated over $500,000 worth of cleaning services to over 3,000 women with cancer nationwide. And whereas Beachland Cleaning Services is one of the 700 partners providing this service and individually donated $20,000 in services to 25 women along the Treasure Coast for them to receive the help they need to maintain a clean home at a time when their immune system is stressed and they are in particular need of a sanitary environment. And whereas dedicated to providing the gift of a clean home to women undergoing cancer treatment, thereby allowing them to focus on their health. The Cleaning for a Reason Foundation continues to grow as it improves the lives of women stricken with this cruel disease. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that April 18th through 24th, 2010, be recognized as the National Cleaning for a Reason Week, and hereby commend for the Cleaning for a Reason Foundation and Beachland Cleaning Service for its dedication to helping women during a traumatic time in their lives. Signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners and adopted this 13th day of April 2010. Mr. Havron, before you do speak, I'd like to say a couple things. One, sometimes we read these proclamations and not everybody knows how meaningful they are. We mentioned a sanitary environment here, and my wife is presently going through cancer treatments, and she got a small infection, which was basically meaningless between treatments, and I saw how particularly painful this was. And we've also talked about the number of people undergoing cancer treatments who don't have much of a support staff. They may not have a husband or child, and we can imagine how difficult a time this is for them and how important someone from your organization coming and cleaning their home would be. So going through chemo treatments with my wife right now, I'd like to particularly offer you my thanks for this service and knowing how meaningful it is to the people you serve.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's a very important service that we've provided. When I first started in 2008, there was 150 partners in about 30 states. Last year, when we spoke last year, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 partners in 45 states and Canada. As we speak now, we have 700 partners in every state and 3 provinces in Canada, which is enormous growth. And it's been very exciting. Beachland Cleaning Service last year, in particular, what we did, we were also able to secure grants from the Dyer Foundation, Will and Tatiana Dyer of Vero Beach, and the WHO Foundation, Women Helping Others, donating over $16,000 in cash donations to the foundation last year, making Beachland Cleaning Service a 2009 Partner of the Year for our donations that we made in that respect. Hopefully I lose that this year and I'll double my money, because that means somebody did much better, so that's great. But the one thing that's most astonishing at this point is when we started, the foundation used to get 50 calls a month for help. Last year, with the increase of partners, it got up to like 200 a month. Now, after the second half of last year, they're up to 2,000 calls a week. It's even forced them to revamp their systems and stuff. It's become very difficult to cover all these people with all the calls for help. So these proclamations have become a very valuable source of recruitment for the foundation to get more partners in more areas. And as they're read across the country, it's very important that we get more people to help others, because there's so many of us asking for help. It's very important to me, and I appreciate everything you do, and I appreciate this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, that kind of goes along with what Freddie had mentioned earlier about some of the great people we have in our community that makes Indian River County such a wonderful place. And I think the timing was very appropriate. We're right in the middle of Relay for Life season. The Beachside had theirs last Friday. I think Sebastian's having theirs this Friday. And then the Vero one will be the following Friday. So that's very, very timely. Next, that takes us to a presentation of a proclamation recognizing April 18th through the 24th, 2010 as Crime Victims' Right Week in Indian River County, Florida. I'll be presenting this, and Sheriff, you'll be accepting another one?
Yes, sir. Busy week.
Yeah. And you've got some folks with you?
Yes.
Good morning and welcome. It's my pleasure to read this proclamation recognizing April 18th to the 24th, 2010 as Crime Victims' Rights Week in Indian River County, Florida. Whereas each year approximately 21 million Americans suffer the indignity of being a victim of crime, and often experience emotional, physical, psychological, and financial harm as a result of such crime. And whereas, being a nation devoted to liberty and justice for all, we must increase our efforts to protect, restore, and expand crime victims' rights and services to apply to every victim, every time. And whereas, the National Crime Victims' Rights Week provides all Americans the opportunity to recommit to ensuring that every victim is deserving of respect, resources, restoration, and justice. And whereas, in Indian River County, the Sheriff's Department joins forces with victim service programs, criminal justice officials, and concerned citizens throughout the county. And whereas, together, their commitment and compassion help to ensure that our legal system stands up for the rights of victims and that our community steps forward to lend a hand to our neighbors in need. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners that we recognize April 18th through the 24th, 2010 as Crime Victims' Rights Week, and furthermore express our sincere appreciation for those victims and crime survivors who have turned personal tragedy into a motivating force to improve our responses to victims of crime and build a more just community. Duly adopted this 13th day of April, 2010, signed by all 5 county commissioners. And Sheriff, would you please tell us a little bit more about the events of the week?
Well, thank you so much. And beginning next week is the National Victims Week, and I brought Miss Shirley Roseman, who is our Victims Advocate Director within the agency. It's a 3-man team. Actually 3-lady team, and they do a remarkable job. And I can tell you, folks, we brought Miss Sandy Fox and her team in. They're the beginning, and this is the end. The ladies here follow up with every serious crime victim and follow up, whether it's counseling, healing, any type of thing that they can do. But as important, Indian River County right now is number 2 in the state with our team following up through the Attorney General's office, getting dollars reimbursed or getting dollars that should be awarded to victims, bona fide victims of crimes. And Shirley and her team personally follow up on that. In fact, she has a dialogue with Tallahassee that I think sometimes they get tired of her call. But she is doing that at a wonderful discretion. I would like for her to introduce her guest.
Good.
This is Lisa Larson. She's the Vice President of the Indian River County Victim Rights Coalition. I'm the President of the coalition, but Lisa will be stepping in my shoes next year, so I'm trying to groom her and get her ready for what's to come. Lisa?
Well, one thing I'd like to just say is thank you so much on behalf of the Indian River Victims Rights Coalition for recognizing Victims' Rights Week. There's just so many great things that we're able to do through the help of our coalition, and we just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity.
If I could just tell our events for the week. Our events actually start on Saturday the 17th. That's going to be our motorcycle run. That starts from the State Attorney's Office in Fort Pierce and ends at the Harley Shop in Stewart. On Sunday the 18th, that's going to be our Vero Sings. That's going to be at the Waxlax Center at St. Ed's. And tickets are $20. Tickets are still available. On Monday the 19th, we're going to have our annual proclamation reading behind the courthouse at our Circle of Love. And we ask all of you all to come out for that if you can. It's going to be at 12 o'clock noon. On Thursday evening, the 22nd, we're going to have our annual vigil memorial ceremony at Memorial Island. And that's where we really, give thanks to our families, our survivors, and supporters of crime victims. And we just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Is there a phone number or website if someone wanted to, get the schedule again, or
sure? How
would they get a hold of you? Or
my direct line is 978-6255. And you can go on the Indian River County Sheriff's Office website to get the schedule also.
Okay, great. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Sure. You did point out that we were commemorating from onset to call to completion. And I just want to say that as a former law enforcement officer in Indian River County, I truly appreciate the efforts of the victim assistance members, the active members and the active volunteers. And there's no greater feel when you're acting upon trauma and disbelief and concern when a victim assistant representative arrives to the scene. It allows the law enforcement officer to continue to do the job in which he or she was sent to do, while many other concerns are being addressed by a victim assistant representative. I also wanted to point out that you are still hosting a cadre of volunteers in this unit?
Absolutely.
About
10 to a dozen volunteers.
10 to a dozen volunteers. Well, thank you and thank them as well.
Right. And I might add that of the 3 ladies, we respond to any tragedy anywhere in the county for any agency. On call, these ladies are on call 3 o'clock in the morning. They'll go to a tragic scene that most of us would rather not be at. And I can tell you from a law enforcement standpoint, once the victims advocates arrive, you take a sigh of relief because they're trained in dealing with the trauma associated with the victims. So we thank them for what they do.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley.
If I could add real quickly, I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention, years ago, my family was the recipient of victim services through Indian River County Sheriff's Office. My daughter was in an accident years ago, back in 1991, the school bus accident, and victim services was right there for my family. At that time, I was not a part of victim services, but you know, I'm a people person, and I feel like I've come full circle to now give back to the community. And I remember the night or the evening of that accident, now County Commissioner Fletcher, then Officer Fletcher, was at our home that evening. I didn't even know him, but he was right there at our home that evening to assist in any way that he could. I remember at the time Sheriff Wheeler, I think, had flown out to Jacksonville.
Yeah, near Jacksonville for a Sheriff's Association meeting.
And he turned around and came back to come and take care of his county. So just thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Good luck. Congratulations. I'll give this to you. Okay. Yes, again. Thank you. And again, we'll have one last presentation here, then we'll take a brief break if anybody wants pictures. Next is a presentation of a proclamation designating April 16th, 2010 as Indian River Tea Party Day of Awareness. Commissioner Davis will be making this presentation, and I think Toby Hill and Chuck Meckling are receiving this. Or just Toby? Okay. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a proclamation designating April 16, 2010 as Indian River Tea Party Day of Awareness. Whereas the Indian River Tea Party is continuing their mission to promote the principles of limited government, fiscal responsibility, and the free market system through education and grassroots civic activity. And whereas the challenges that are facing our county today, it is incumbent for all Americans to educate themselves about the appropriate role government should play and our responsibilities as citizens to participate in and ensue adherence to our Constitution by our elected officials. And whereas citizens of our community are encouraged to attend the Indian River Tea Party Day of Awareness on Friday, April 16th from 12 to 1 p.m. at Holman Stadium, to not only participate in an educational event, but to exercise their rights of peaceful assembly to communicate their strong desire of fiscal responsibility and government at all levels. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that April 16, 2010 will be officially declared the Indian River Tea Party Day of Awareness, and we urge all of our citizens of Indian River County to recognize the importance of informed participation in local, state, and federal government. Adopted this 13th day of April 2010, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Toby?
Thank you, Wesley. Thank you, Commission, for the proclamation and this recognition. We hope to have and expect to have a peaceful and respectful gathering. We hope to provide informative message about our Constitution as it relates to the current activities in Washington. This is an important day. We hope to speak to the American public and ask them to get involved, and so that our government will listen and will be fiscally responsible. And we have a simple message. It's fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free market systems. We have had a strong outpouring of support from the community. We have amazing number of volunteers that will be helping us that day. And we've had, quite frankly, strong financial support in helping meet our needs, our financial needs. It'll be at Holman Stadium, Dodgertown, from 12 to 1. We expect to be prompt. This is a working man's lunch. We want to get you in and out, get our message across. We have 3 wonderful speakers, Paul Tanner and John Moore from last year, and then Marco Rubio will be the keynote speaker. I want to be very clear, this is not in support of him as a candidate, but Marco's message and his ability to deliver what we stand for is unique. And so we've asked him to lend his voice to our purpose. So we thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to a wonderful day.
Good. Thank you. Absolutely. Okay, at this point, we're going to take a 5-minute break for photographs from the proclamations, and then we will pick back up with the consent agenda in 5 minutes. go ahead and call the meeting back to order. At this point, by our prior action, we are going to move the consent agenda to this point in the agenda right now. So with that, are there any items you wish to pull on consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve all the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. That'll take us now back to the final presentation. That will be Glenn Herron and Dr. Faraday on City of Vero Beach electric system. Good morning and welcome. Thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to thank the county board for all the support that it's shown to us since 2007 with regard to the utilities that we receive as county customers from the city, whether it's water, sewer, and irrigation, and the leadership that you've demonstrated by setting up the Tri-Jurisdiction Committee, or by the efforts that you've made with regard to the electric customers in the county served by the city. There are 18,000 of them. Those are spread over each of the 5 districts, and we appreciate the support and the letter that you sent to FPL on that. We're trying to get this up. We had it set up before, but having some technical difficulties.
Yeah. Jason, can you give us a little help down here on the...
Sorry for the delay.
Oh, that's okay.
I don't sing very well, all right? Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. As I noted, there are electric customers served by the city in the county in each of your 5 districts. What this shows is the kilowatt hours used. These are the bills from essentially January 2010 to October 2010. In January 2010, there's an aberration in what the figures are because FPL was required to give a one-time adjustment in its rates by the Public Service Commission. But if you focus on March 2010, you'll see that it describes the service only, which is the county, the shores, and the city. And it shows FPL, what the rates are, as well as the Orlando Utility Commission. The city's rates are 34% above that of FPL from March 2010.
Dr. Faraday, if I could, we do have the technology to, as you're going through this, for somebody to point at this, and either that or we actually have the pointer.
Sorry.
And I know that if somebody could either show them the pointer or the mouse to be able to follow this, because I've been through it once, but for people, somebody to understand it, this is going to be,
okay.
And I don't know how to run it, I just know we have the technology to.
Okay. The average number of kilowatt hours used in the city is 1,100 hours. We're using 1,000 here. For March 2010, we show the figures for the county, $123. We show for the shores, the city, and also for FPL. Notice also the amount that's shown for the Orlando Utility Commission. The rates for the city are 34% above that for FPL. What does that mean for the future? If we go across here, we see that in September 2010, this year, the city's rebate for excess fuel charges ends, and the percentage goes up by 1%. What would happen if the city eliminated its nearly $6 million transfer to the city's general fund from the electric utility? The rates would still be 26% higher than FPL. We've noted that down here with that transfer. Next item shows the electric bill savings via the sale to FPL. We notice the number of customers here. The inside city customers are nearly 13,000. The outside customers are nearly, and they represent about 39%. The customers in the county are nearly 17,000, represent about 51% of the customers. There's about 3,300, or 10%, for a total of 3,323. In the city's audited 2009 financial report, on page 132, the city listed for the past 4 years, the number of customers, all of which averaged around the 33,231. If you recall, you supported the Stan Mayfield legislation in 2008. The city did a recount of its customers and arrived at 27,000 customers so it could avoid the Stan Mayfield legislation. That's never been reflected on its audited financial reports nor on its submissions to the State Public Service Commission. Again, using the 34% that we have on the amount of city charges in excess of FPL, and we apply that to the city's budget for residential, commercial, and industrial, we see that the city's estimated revenue for the electric utility is about $92.5 million for this next year. For the same amount of electricity, if we had FPL, the cost would be $69 million. That is a difference of $23.5 million that is being sucked out of the economy each year in this local community that could be used for other purposes: jobs, expansion of houses, home improvements, other types of activities like that. This is what is sucked out of the economy. Now let's go over to the next box here. The city's amount of that is a little bit over $9 million. The county is losing nearly $12 million a year because of the excess city rates.
That is the county residents. The city residents are $9 million, the county residents are $11 million?
That's correct. And the Shores is slightly over $2 million. Again, for the total of the 23.47, which matches over here. That is a horrendous amount to be sucked out of the economy just to provide local electric utility services. This is a huge economic disparity. I'd like to mention one other thing with regard to the 34%. That's the rate disparity that exists right now. It'll be 35% in September. If all things stayed equal with FPL's rates and the city's rates, that rate of 34% would increase by a little bit more than 4% per year over each of the next 7 years per the city's existing OUC contract, which means that there would be about an additional 30%. So in 2017, that cost, assuming all things were equal, would be 64% above FPL. That's what we have to look forward to, and that's built into the contract. Let's also mention the municipal surcharge that was eliminated by the city last year, but in name only. That was a tax that was imposed upon county customers to the tune of $3 million a year. Where has that gone? The name has been eliminated. However, the city has taken the $3 million, which was a revenue generation factor, and included that in its base power rates now. It has not gone dollar-wise, only in name only. What it does mean, too, is the city has not informed its city residents that it has passed on $1.2 million of that $3 million onto their backs and on top of their 10% city tax, because now the 39% of the city customers bear that $3 million cost. That would not be allowed by the Public Service Commission if the PSC had control over that.
Dr. Ferry, just to make sure I'm clear, in the OUC contract, those annual rate increases, aren't those in there as the maximum potential that they could charge and not necessarily what they will charge? I thought how that was structured was they could go to that rate, but not necessarily will have to.
It depends upon what the usage is, et cetera, but that's what's built in, is a 4+% increase per year, each of the 7 years.
All right, thank you.
The city has noted that its rates have been lower than FPL. Consistently, they have not. If we notice the inside customers up here, again, the 39%, and the outside customers, which are 61%, if we take the number of customers using 1,000 or under kilowatt hours, it's about 62% of the customer base. For 2,500 and under customers, there's an additional 26%, for a total of 88% of the customers use 2,500 or fewer kilowatt hours. Over the years of 2009 through 2000, the average has been 23% above FPL. And if you note from essentially 2004 on up to 2009, it's been over 20, 30, and 41% the past year, on average. There is no prospect of the city having rates equal to or lower than FPL, particularly when your supplier, OUC, is 30% above FPL. It will not happen. I'd like to present Glenn to give the presentation with regard to the model. Also, I'd like to thank Glenn personally for having handled the utility issues for the past 6 weeks while I've been tied up with medical issues. Thank you.
Jason, how do I... yeah, oh, there we go. Oh, it's still on the pen. Good morning, Commissioners. I wanted to, before I get into the model, and what the model does is it takes a look at fair market value of the system and rate disparities of FP&L and the impact on property taxes for the city of Vero Beach. Before I get into that, I wanted to show a video, if I could, of a August 12th, 2008 meeting where Dr. Faraday was here in front of the Board of County Commissioners, and he was looking for support for the utility authority referendum back in that day. Anyways, the city had showed up to rebut his testimony, and that's what I want to show you because it does provide some info on fair market value. Again, this is Jim Gabbard's rebuttal to Steve, and it was about a 15-minute presentation. I'm only going to show you 30 seconds here, because what he talks about, he'll talk about the value of the system.
To comply with the law. There's absolutely no question about that. And we will. If the bill applies to Vero Beach or any other jurisdiction, I'm sure they're doing the same thing throughout the state of Florida, evaluating this as it relates to their municipal utility, we'll comply. But until we make that determination, I don't think the Commission really is in the best interest of anybody, because we're looking for you for leadership. We want, and I've talked to, again, all of you about this, this is a big decision. This is a $100 million a year operation. We've got, and we were trying to estimate, we've done some estimates over it, we don't know exactly how much, but it's between $200 and $300 million in assets that the city, $100 million of underground utilities, which is huge dollars. So to just jump into this thing and get on the wrong side.
Jim Gabbard told you that the value of the system was $200 to $300 million in his opinion, that the value of the underground utilities alone was $100 million in and of itself.
Glenn, I have to make a distinction there. What I heard was he said that the value of the assets was $200 to $300 million, and so that doesn't necessarily translate into the value.
Well, it's the value. What he's talking about in my mind is the fair market value of the assets of the system. When he's saying $200 to $300 million.
As much as I support what you're doing, I just want to be clear on what I actually heard.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and use. Let me close out of this. What does $300 million mean? Here's what the model does. In yellow, you'll see all the things that we can change as variables in the sensitivity analysis. We can talk about changes, we can talk about the value of transmission distribution, the value of baseload generation investments here, the value of power plant land, the current debt of the enterprise fund system, which is a known number, underfunded pension for the employees of the City of Vero Beach electric utility. Let me show you what $300 million means. If that really was fair market value of the system, if you sell the system for $300 million and you sell baseload generation investments for say $50 million, you're going to take those proceeds and you're going to do this. Number one, Dr. Faraday has showed you that at 34% more expensive than FP&L, city customers alone are losing $9.4 million. That's $9.4 million they will put in their pockets right here. If you sell the system for $300 million base load generation for 50, you have $350 million in proceeds, pay off the current debts of the system, which is $34 million, and fund the underfunded pension liability. You will end up with $308 million in proceeds. If you invest that at 4.1%, that's $12 million in interest income on $308 million. Just so that you don't think I'm pulling these numbers out of the thin air, this is the City of Vero Beach's CAFR, their balance sheet as of 9/30/2009 for the enterprise fund system. Their current bonds are about $62 million. They have other liabilities about for total liabilities of $74 million. But they also have cash and investments on the electrical fund system, on the electrical fund, in addition to plant, property, and equipment, which I've shown as zero here. We are considering plant, property, and equipment, which is T&D, in the fair market value analysis. But these other assets don't just disappear. They will be used to defease the liabilities. So net liabilities of the enterprise fund is $34 million, and that is the number that I have used here. So back to the mechanics, and I'm only going to show you this for this one example. I just want to go through the mechanics a little bit so you understand how the model is driven. From that point, we'll just play with some numbers, and I'll show you some results. So $308 million, back to this example of proceeds. That's $12 million in interest income. What you will lose by selling the system, what the City of Vero Beach will lose, is $5.9 million in transfers to the general fund. $1.8 million in administrative transfers. What that is, those are costs, those are people who work in City Hall, basically, who are providing funds for the enterprise system, for the electrical enterprise fund system. They are employed there for that purpose. So you'll lose that revenue. So $7.7 million of revenues will be lost, but $14 million is gained because you no longer need those 10 or 15 employees who are largely accountants and lawyers and portions of Jim Gabbard's salary and Charlie Batunik's salary. I mean, you no longer need that anymore. So you could argue that there's a dollar for dollar savings, and so that's the $14 million. The combined effect of that is you pick up $14 million in new revenues, you lose $7.8 million in revenues to the enterprise, to the general fund, which means you have a net $6.7 million ahead. You're $6.7 million ahead in the general fund. The impact of that is that you will use that money to reduce your property taxes. Current property taxes for the City of Vero Beach is $4.6 million. The millage rate is 1.9367. So if you bring in $6.7 million in new revenues, you wipe out property taxes, and in fact you have a negative millage rate. The City of Vero Beach will be like living in Alaska, where they write you a check to live there. That's what $300 million means. So, aggregate effect is this. You have $9.4 million in electric savings, $6.7 million in new taxes, now in new revenues to the enterprise fund. Sorry, I misspoke. There is a negative federal tax effect there. The sword cuts both ways. When you have a property tax increase, you actually have a federal tax benefit. When it goes the other way, you have a federal tax decrease. So in any case, $14 million will be saved by the taxpayers of this city. On average, that's about, for the 13,000 customers of the City of Vero Beach electric system, that's about $1,100 per year. Here's the total effect. This is city alone for $300 million is $14 million, almost $15 million in savings. County customers, the 51% who live outside the city, will receive as Dr. Faraday had shown, about $12 million in electric utility savings by going to FP&L. Shores, 2.3, and new taxes, because now transmission and distribution is taxable. Those lines are now taxable. The lines that were sold by the City of Vero Beach to FP&L now has to pay ad valorem and tangible tax on that. That's another $1 million in new revenues for the community as a whole. So at $300 million, not only were the city residents better off by $14 million, the community as a whole in New River County was better off by almost $30 million. So if $300 million was the right answer, why didn't they sell it? So let's just play now. Let's assume that baseload generation investments were zero. that you can't get rid of them, you can't sell them, you can't assign them. You're just going to have to accept the delivery of the power and then resell it back to the grid. I think that's an absurd assumption, but let's assume that it is. Let's assume Jim Gabbard's number was $200 million. What does that do at 34% more expensive than FP&L? I'll make a note here that inherent in this model, the analysis we're showing here, is a 25% tax bracket because federal property taxes are deductible. And we can change that to whatever number you'd like, but that's just for this purpose. So $200 million, what's the effect? Okay. Back to that sheet again. Again, nothing changes, $9.4 million in savings for city customers. $200 million in proceeds, pay off the debt, pay off the underfunded pension liabilities. You have $158 million in proceeds, and I'm not going to bore you with the details. Again, you lose these amounts, the transfers and the admin transfers to the general fund, but you make interest income, and you lose the employees that were providing those services. So in this particular case, you have a $600,000 net benefit to the general fund. You will decrease property taxes again. You won't wipe them out, but here you have a 13% decrease in property taxes for the city of Vero Beach. And the total effect is this. City of Vero Beach makes now, instead of $14 million, they'd only make $9 million savings in their pocket. Right now it's zero. That number they're getting is zero right now. I'm talking about putting $9.9 million in their pocket if we sold the system. Nothing changes for the county. Nothing changes for the shores. Nothing changes for T&D, because T&D, for the taxable value of T&D, that's just driven by the rate disparity with FP&L, which is what Dr. Faraday shown here. See how the county never changes. County and shores never changes. You've always got the 12 and the $2 million in savings. So here, we're $24 million ahead, but the city is $9.9 million ahead. That's at Jim Gabbard's lowest number. Now, I would tell you, I'm not entirely certain that those numbers are right. So I don't have an argument with what you said, Commissioner Solari. We've heard that 150 is more like it. Let's see what 150 is. And again, here I'm not showing any value for baseload. I'm leaving the land for the power plant as a park. What does that do? Again, there's the number 150. Here's the effect. Now we're $8.3 million ahead. No changes for county, shores, or the taxable value of T&D now. Now we're $23 million ahead. That's a good deal. Maybe we should do that. That's definitely a get out of the utility business. $100 million might be an answer. Maybe it's as low as $100 million. I think that's probably a more reasonable number. I think in my mind, this is probably the most reasonable scenario. We're still ahead, $6.8 million, no changes for the others. $21 million in savings for the community. How low would you like me to go? In fact, let's go ahead and put in an exit penalty. That's been a discussion, that maybe there's a $50 million exit penalty if we go to the OUC. That's not true. $50 million exit penalty only applies if they stay in the contract and they buy their power from somebody else, if they buy their supplemental power from somebody else. The penalty for breach is $20 million. That's as high as it goes. So let's put in $20 million. Okay, we're going to sell for $100, and we're going to pay a $20 million penalty. We're going to pay off all the bonds. There's the penalty now. Now we only have $38 million in proceeds. What happens now? Well, in this particular case, we are talking about a property tax increase. We're talking about $4.2 million being added to property taxes. That sounds kind of bad, doesn't it? So property taxes are going to jump by $92 million. 92%. Thank you, Steve. Let me put that in perspective. When you have a property tax increase, this is a sample bill from a guy who lives in the city of Vero Beach. He has a $146,000 tax assessed value for his ad valorem taxes. He pays $2,500. If I told you that the property taxes were going to double, you don't double your bottom bill, the bottom line here, the $2,500. You only double the amount you pay to the city of Vero Beach. 1/10 of that number. So when you look at this, when the public looks at this, and I talk about a property tax increase, don't jump to the conclusion that it's on your total bill. City of Vero Beach is only a tiny portion of your bill if you live in the city. It's that amount that could double under this scenario. So back to this example. Yeah, I almost doubled property taxes here. What's the effect? You still saved $9.4 million in electric bills. I increased your property taxes. You get a federal tax deduction on that, and you're still $6.1 million ahead. This is with a penalty, selling for only $100 million, which Jim Gabbard told us that the value of the underground alone was worth $100 million. Zero for base load. And we as a community are ahead by $21 million. You know, let's go ahead and just give the system away, shall we? Let's just give it to FP&L for free. And let's see what that does. We're going to pay off, we're going to float a bond to pay off all those other items, the penalty and everything else. There's that. You can see there's no fair market value anymore. It's gone. We just have to pay. We're going to have to float a $62 million debt. We lose the money to the general fund. What's the effect? Still ahead by $3 million. Property taxes, certainly 180% increase in property taxes. But look, you're still $3.1 million ahead for the city of Vero Beach. In the most absurd example. $18 million saved in this community if we gave the system away. Totally absurd assumption. FP&L will never be allowed to pick this system up for free. They will not be allowed to do it because that would produce a rate of return on equity that is infinite. The PSC regulates rates of return. They will not be allowed to pick this system up for free. It's also the argument why no buyback surcharge exists. The city is out there saying that look, if we get FP&L rates, they're going to add a buyback surcharge to you. That's inherently wrong, because somewhere between $0 and $300 million is an answer that gives FP&L, when they pick up $68 million in new revenues from the 34,000 customers that exist in the system, there is a number between $0 and $300 million that gives them the rate of return that is regulated by the PSC in the state of Florida. You can't get it for free. But look, free works. You could have given the system away and you'd been better off. Now, we can play with whatever you like. If you want to argue about, you know, again, I think this is absurd. I think that probably a more realistic number is, I'm guessing here, but let's say it's 125 million. That's probably a more reasonable, that's probably somewhere in there is, in that range is what FP&L would probably offer us. I'm guessing, I'm not an expert on what the fair market value of T&D is, but that's what I had to do. I had to create a model that you could play with the fair market values to see what the path forward should be. When I tell you that you can give the system away, that should tell you, it should be fairly clear that there isn't much of a downside here. I can't see the downside, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have if you want to play with the model in any way.
Commissioner Davis.
Not necessarily to play, but I do have a quick question. Go back to your scenario where the system is given away. Put a $0 in there. Leave the $20 million.
Yep.
And then now go to the tax bill of the city of Vero Beach taxpayer.
Yep.
And show me that's a 180% increase on their Vero Beach municipal taxes.
That's correct.
Now, and which on that $200,000 tax bill would be how much money?
That's the example taxpayer.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That's what I say. So, what you're looking at.
Let me show you. Let's go to that. Let's put that guy in the one. What the model can do, it can actually show you individually. If you have a house and you want to come to me, Glenn, and say, this is an answer to your question, Mr. Davis, is you can give me your tax assessed value. You can give me how many kilowatt hours a month you use, and I'll be able to tell you what your effect is.
That's what I want to know. I want to know.
Here's this guy at 146,020. He had it was $283 was his trim notice. This was the example we showed.
Okay.
This guy at 146,000 pays $283. Does everyone see that?
Mm-hmm. So you increase that by 180%, and how much does that increase that portion of his tax bill by?
Okay, so here's the guy. So there he is. So here's what happens. Here's 146, and I'm showing that he wouldn't use 1,000. That's a larger house. He would use about 2,000 kilowatt hours a month. So back to that example, his tax bill, he currently pays $283. We'd pay $266 in his monthly bill to the electric, City of Vero Beach Electric. His total annual outflow for property taxes and electric would be $3,400. Under this scenario, his property tax would go to $793 instead of $283 would jump to $793 in property taxes. He would get a deduction on that now of 25%, assuming he was right in the middle of the tax bracket, and this guy would save $433 per year.
So with a 180% increase in their taxes.
Correct.
And the Vero Beach Municipal ad valorem taxes, with the reduction of the power structure from Vero Beach Utilities to FP&L, there's a total savings between those two of that individual come out paying $433 annually cheaper.
Less. He would put $433 into his pocket, just one customer.
And that's giving the plan away.
That's what we assume here. Yeah, that was giving the plan away, which we know is absurd.
I'm ready to make a switch.
There you go. I guess I'm done.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I guess mine are kind of general questions.
Is your light on?
These are kind of general questions. If I was sitting home watching this on television as a person paying electric, I'd want to ask, have you made this presentation to the City Council?
The answer is yes, we actually have. When the 3-minute rule was lifted, we actually had a chance to do it, and
And their response?
They wanted to see the model, and they haven't called me back to ask them to present, but I'm happy to present it to them if that's what they want.
Well, no, I'm not speaking for them. I'm just curious, because I know if I were sitting on City Council and I heard this presentation, or if this was a power plant that the county owned, I would want input from staff to rebuttal whatever you said and then make a decision based on that. And I appreciate, I want to thank you also, Glenn, for coming over and spending time with me, and I think other commissioners, to go through this prior to the meeting. It makes it much more easier and understandable, and you've put a lot of work in this. My second question would be, is something Dr. Faraday said I found interesting, because I've had people ask me about the base power rate, and I've also got a printout from the city on that, and quite frankly, I'm still not sure that I understand how can it help, but I don't recall seeing anything in there. First, the power rate, the base power rate, I believe is higher, it's a higher percentage than the fuel adjustment rate was. So they lowered the cost of electric, but they raised that rate. And you mentioned that, what was it, that they were charging?
Yeah, here's your
county residents, put it back in again.
Bills. This was as of February.
The cost of municipal surcharge of $3 million a year, it's not a cost generation charge, but it's a revenue generation charge. That has been included in the base rate per the city's consultants.
Dr. Faraday, you might need to come a little closer for those at home.
Right. The $3 million that used to be the municipal surcharge that was charged only to county customers has been eliminated in name only per the city's consultants last fall. That $3 million has been added to the bulk power cost, or the base rate, as not a cost factor but as a revenue generation. If the PSC had control over the City of Vero Beach Electric, it would eliminate that $3 million because it is not a cost generation charge.
Based on this presentation, and assuming that it's correct, and I believe it is correct, but assuming it's correct, where is the incentive for the city to want to keep the power plant? I mean, they've got to have some reason for, in the past, and I know this has come up and I haven't followed it, and I watch the city council meetings periodically. I don't follow them closely, sometimes have the inability not to speak my mind, and if I don't watch other autonomous boards, I don't talk about them. So, but at any rate, I don't understand why they wouldn't be saying, this is a windfall.
This type of analysis should have been done back in 2006. That's when the city's consultant presented to the city 6 different options for proceeding with the termination of the FMPA contract in December of last year. And the consultant proposed 2 of the 6 options as sell options. Those were disregarded by the city staff, and only the 4 other options for continuing the operations were included. There was no analysis done at that time in 2006, which should have been done. This is the type of analysis. The best we can figure out now with regard to the city, perhaps it's pride of ownership or whatever. The concern that we have is with regard to the 17,000 customers in the county as well as the 3,300 in the shores, is we have no option. The documents that were provided by the city to the FPL were essentially consisted of the OUC contract and also the agreements with FMPA for the 3 base cost power facilities, Stand 1 and 2 in St. Lucie. There's no documentation that's been provided that divides up the transmission and distribution, the revenue that relates to the county or the shores customers, or the amount of usage, et cetera. Those types of documents, I don't know how FPL would be able to make an assessment.
Well, and that's the thing that I find curious, and as a commission, we don't have a great deal of authority in this. We have an interest, obviously, and in fact, I'm a county resident, pays city utilities. But if I was sitting on this commission and it was our power plant, and you came into my office and showed me this presentation, I would get with my administrator, and I would ask that we'd have a workshop or whatever you want to call it, and I would have the county legal and financial staff here, and to go point by point through this, to understand it is not being a CPA, to understand it and say, show me where you guys are wrong. Show me the advantage for me voting or even being interested in keeping our plant. Your case is very, very strong.
Glenn has made the presentation to former utility director R.B. Sloan as well as to John Lee.
Is it a private meeting or public meeting?
No, I haven't shown them. They've seen bits and pieces of it, but they've never seen it like you've seen it.
But the city council has not seen this either?
Yeah, they actually have. They actually have. We showed it to them. I think it was when Charlie Wilson was on the commission at the time.
Okay. I find this very interesting, fascinating, and the numbers. So,
Mr. Wheeler, you had raised the question. Why hasn't the city? I looked backwards when you were talking because I wondered why they weren't here. I would have liked to have had some rebuttal.
I agree. And my question would be, if the city manager or anybody was here, that'd be the same question. What's the incentive for the city to continue, if they are continuing to?
Well, let me argue with myself. Maybe I have to do that. One of the things that they're going to say is, well, Glenn, they're going to get their base rate increase. Remember that big fear we had last year about the 30% increase in base rates that the FP&L was going to get, and the PSC basically told them no. They got about a 5% increase in their base rates. So had they gotten that rate increase, and maybe they will in the future, okay, we're not going to be 34% more expensive anymore. We're going to be that would have been only 27%. We would still be 27% higher had they gotten their big base rate increase from last year. So even with the absurd example here, Mr. Davis is at 27%. I'm putting in 27%.
That's the FP&L increase, so that there's a spread only between 34 now between Vero Beach Utilities and FP&L.
Yeah, if FP&L gets their base rate increase
that they asked for, that they were rejected on.
If they can get it sometime here in the future, we will still be 27% higher than FP&L. Okay. We're still ahead here under our ridiculous assumption. We're not going to do zero. This is ridiculous. I have shown this model to high-powered attorneys. I've shown them to partners of Price Waterhouse who live here in town, and I'm sorry, nobody can shoot a hole in it, and that's why I'm here. Somebody shoot a hole in this. Somebody tell me I'm wrong. Because if I'm right, then we shouldn't be in the utility business. We should have sold this a long time ago. Why wasn't this analysis done? Why does Steve and I have to do it? You know, we're just volunteers, and we are not agents of FP&L.
Thank you, Glenn.
Glenn, could you go back to your menu page?
Which one?
The general menu.
The variables.
The one with the menu, the one with all the different files on it.
Oh yeah.
I just want just there. Go back.
Sorry.
I mean, each one of these folders actually represents.
This is half of it, Bob.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I just want to make a point. What we've seen is a little snippet of the work Dr. Faraday and Glenn Horan have done, and I'd like to thank them for their work. And just let everybody know that if we actually wanted to go through all of these files, we'd probably be here for all day today and into tomorrow. I mean, the amount of work that they went into to do this was outstanding and incredible. And I want to thank you for that. This model itself, despite my one comment, is incredible. And it goes on from portion to portion. It answers any question I could come up with. And I just think it's a tremendous service to our community. To answer Commissioner Wheeler's question of where is the incentive for keeping the power plant, it's wherever the incentive for keeping the sewer and water in the city is. I'm not sure exactly where it is either, but they're lying side by side someplace. But where they're not is any place that's based on any financial analysis. And I think that's something I've said time after time, but people still don't grasp. The city staff can do or say what they want as long as they don't base it on any financial analysis. And I've made so many requests for the financial basis for what they've said over the years. It's I'm not going to go through each financial request.
Bob, I feel your pain.
But you can say it. I mean, if you're not basing it on any financial matter, then it may make sense to keep it. So that said, one thing that you didn't mention, except implicitly, is that this whole thing is an incredible economic development issue. Now, the county instituted a buy local campaign, which just by the nature of things hasn't done too much. We should have a save local campaign. We could have a save local campaign by rationalizing the city's utilities, and we'd save a lot more than $23 million a year. And that would inject such dynamicism into our community, it'd be incredible. Because that savings would be year after year, and that's the type of thing which would make our community tremendously competitive. But as it is, a lot of people are now asking, where are your utilities located, finding out they're the city of Vero Beach, and going elsewhere. And that problem is just going to increase over the years. So, I thank you. One of the reasons why I thank you so much and why I've been so supportive of you is that I've lived in the city of Vero Beach for the last 29 years. And by the grace of God, I'm going to be there until my wife and I celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. And I'm paying a premium just for that privilege, which I would personally like to do away with.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of families who have to move because they cannot pay for that privilege. So again, I salute your work, and I hope that at the end, one way or the other, that you're successful in getting the result which the citizens of the city of Vero Beach and Indian River County deserve.
Thank you, Commissioner Solari. I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the reasons why the status quo has remained is because fear of change has dominated the issue, that somehow property taxes were going to go up. They forgot to talk about the rate disparities with FP&L all these years that we've been losing, when it was 58% more expensive than last year. It's well beyond $25 million lost a year. People keep forgetting to talk about that. And that's what the model does, is it relates all of the components and tells you what your savings are. So thank you for that.
Are there any more comments from the commissioners?
Okay.
Commissioner Fletcher?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Horan, Dr. Faraday, thank you very much. This is now the third time that I've seen this presentation, once before at the Utility Advisory Committee. And I believe when Mr. Horan fired up this presentation in my office for a 30-minute session, I believe it yielded, about 4 hours, Glenn?
Yeah. and I'm happy to spend whatever time anybody wants to spend on it. I mean, and yeah, we were there. We were there the whole afternoon. We got into every detail.
It's an incredible model. I appreciate it. My view has not changed. It's quite eye-opening, and I agree that if this commission had the authority to make that change, this commission would want to hear this and have to have a workshop and address the issues and have staff brought in. However, as we discussed, this commission is not in authority, does not have the jurisdictional power to be able to make that change. Dr. Faraday has commented on some of the tools that we have provided to move this along. I believe in the spirit of resolution and letters, this commission as a whole has been supportive, and we appreciate those kind words. I asked at that time and at the committee level, and now here again, what can this standing commission do at this point to move forward your endeavors to bring true value back to the citizens, and perhaps maybe save a few of the businesses and the residents who are forced to leave this county due to an inability to be able to pay for their expenses, the luxury and privilege of having utilities at such exorbitant rates.
I think we appreciate the efforts that you've done so far. I think pursuit of the letter to FPL, see if they will meet with the county. It may ultimately come to a point in time where I understand fully there's a difference between the franchise agreement the county's got with the city for the use of the right-of-ways, et cetera, versus the territorial agreement between the city and FPL that's filed with PSC. It may ultimately come at a time where the county may have to file with the Public Service Commission a request for change in territory in order for FPL to assimilate the 18,000 customers of the city into the FPL system. If that were done jointly, particularly with the shores, that shows what is occurring. Because 61% of the customers having no voice in the operations is absolutely absurd. And we are paying 1/3 of the city's budget from county and shores customers. $7 million out of $22 million, and we have no voice in what's done. That is not the American way. It needs to be.
What's the time frame on the franchise that you said there may come a time?
The franchise is in perpetuity until there's a request either by FPL, the city, or by the Public Service Commission on its own motion. I have not been able to find that there has been a situation where the PSC has responded to a county to open up the territorial agreement. However, when they accepted our complaint that we filed last September, it's the first time they ever accepted a complaint from 2 citizens. So it can be done. And there is a piece of legislation that allows the Public Service Commission to require a hearing on a change to the territorial agreement based upon its own motion. If the shores and if the county asked for that, representing 61% of the customers, I'm almost certain they would have to yield, particularly with the mood in Tallahassee for giving openness and transparency to government. And we also have got the Speaker of the Senate, and we've also got Senator Negrin, both of whom support the efforts, as well as Representative Mayfield. I would also like to point out one other thing, too, that when Glenn is mentioning about the tax increases, it's not only being able to tax the transmission and distribution for the benefit of the county, but also all of the other districts, Mosquito, Hospital, School District. They all would get an additional tax increase by reason of those T&D lines being now taxable, as opposed to being municipal owned. It would not be a benefit to us to sell to OUC, because then you can't tax. It's another municipality, and it's also another unregulated price monopoly.
And where are their rates?
The school board
They're 30% above FPL right now.
The school board alone picked up, of that $1.1 million that was coming in new tangible tax, the school board alone picked up, I think it was 300,000. I mean, I think that one of the discussions in the school board right now is they're having a budget crisis. Well, 300,000 would go a long way to hiring a few more teachers.
And just the reduction in electric cost in the school system.
Yeah. There just have to be some new and innovative ways of confronting the issue, particularly with the Public Service Commission I'm not certain that the city is going to be volunteering or really willing to move on the issue because it's a cash cow. They don't have to report to 61% of the customers, and they have the benefit. They control it. Thank you very much for the...
Just real quick, two questions. If somebody wanted to hear this presentation, who would they get a hold of, or how would they go about? Do y'all have a website? Because really what I'm as much interested in now is just like you said, somebody show me where this is wrong. Because I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's almost what you put forward is almost too good to be true. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but to give it away and still come out $430 cheaper for a City of Vero Beach resident is very interesting. But with that being, is there a way that y'all have a website or something that if there was a property owners association that wanted to invite you out to come look at it?
I'll just give you my email if people want to email me. It's Glenn with 2 N's at HFB. That's 6 letters. It's HFBLLC.com.
GLENN.
Yeah, GLENN
at H as in Harry, Frank
as in
F as in Frank, B as in boy, LLC as in Limited Liability Corporation.
Correct.
.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission?
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Gentlemen.
Okay, that takes us now. We're going.
I think Mr. Dunkel would like.
Did you? All right. If anyone from the audience would like to speak to this, please come up. I would like you to limit your comments strictly to the presentation. There's no one from the city here, so I don't want any city bashing or anything like that. So if you have a comment specific to the presentation, come on up and we'll go with that.
Yeah. We can talk about good weather.
I'll go first. No city bashing. My name is Charlie Wilson, 1057 6th Avenue. I just want to answer a couple of those questions, and one of the things that Glenn, we have a website. It's called sellveroelectric.com, and it is up and operating. The model is not up yet, but it will be in the next day or two. But it is sellveroelectric.com. And to answer a couple of your questions, I have appeared before this commission several times about this particular issue. To answer part of your question is one of the reasons they don't want to sell it is, Mr. Barrett, I think there was a study on the number of employees, and if I recall, the number of employees in Sebastian was 5.7 per thousand. The number of employees for the county was somewhere around 10. Is that correct, Mr. Barrett? And the number of employees for the city of Vero Beach is over 25. So you have close to 5 times as many employees within the city of Vero Beach, and that probably is an incentive not to sell this plant. The other thing that I'd like to add to the presentation is that in 1976, when this was done before, and I see that former Mayor Gregg is in the audience, who negotiated with FP&L the original sale of the electric system, which would have saved us many millions of dollars over this period of time, that the offer from FP&L in 1976 was $46 million. Far different than zero. You're right. The impact of economic development of not selling this plant is huge. Probably the single biggest thing that we can do to help our economy in this crisis and our 14.3% unemployment is to sell Vero Electric. And I know that Dr. Faraday and Mr. Herron and Stan Mayfield and Debbie Mayfield have carried this ball for years. And it is they that have moved this forward, not anybody else, not any political activity. As they did it by themselves. And like you, I'm so grateful that they have spent this time doing this. But there is something this commission can do. I have come before this commission before, and one of the things to remember is that 61% of these people that are paying this bill do not live in the city of Vero Beach. However, city of Vero Beach residents are county residents also. But those 61% have nothing to say about this. And so I have asked that you have at least your attorney at least advise you where you are on these territorial agreements. Now, y'all have been reluctant to do that up to date. So the town of Indian River Shores ended up having to hire outside counsel to be able to advise them on the impact that they have and the things that they can do. Now, the thing to remember is that eventually this is going to go to the Public Service Commission. People are incorrect if they think that in 2012 they're going to be able to notify the city of Vero Beach and then at some later date be out of their agreement. It will not happen. It will not happen until we go to the Public Service Commission. And you as a county commission can go to the Public Service Commission as a friend of the 61% of the customers that are being held hostage with no say at all. Now, it is absolutely unusual. We understand that the City of Vero Beach is a different organization, and you don't have authority, but you do have some authority with the Public Service Commission. So we have had to go to the unusual way of, and I want to just bring you up to date on requiring a referendum that requires that the City of Vero Beach sell the electric utility, because we find out now that the City of Vero Beach is not going to do this voluntarily. Never do this voluntarily. And it's just 4 sentences. If you don't mind, I'd like to tell you what's in that referendum, and then I'll be quiet.
Promise?
I promise. It says, upon receipt of an offer to purchase assets of Vero Beach Municipal Electric by a power provider rate regulated by the Florida Public Service Commission, resulting in proceeds that provide sufficient funds to retire all monetary obligations of the electric utility, the City of Vero Beach shall, within 12 months after receipt of such an offer from the petition the Florida Public Service Commission to abolish its territorial agreement. That's what has to do with you. Within 24 months after said receipt, the City of Vero Beach shall not expend dollars from any source, local, state, or federal, for the transmission, distribution, and generation of electric utilities, except in the case of assets that may be deemed non-transferable, St. Lucie Nuclear, Stand 1, Stand 2, baseload generation, and that may be managed for resale. Now, what that means is the referendum doesn't take place until they get an offer. So when they say nobody wants to buy the plant, doesn't matter. The referendum doesn't take place until they get an offer. Number 2 is they cannot have it for zero. They have to have it so that it retires every single obligation of the City of Vero Beach. Number 3 is it has to be rate regulated by the Florida Public Service Commission, so it can't be, you can't throw everything in the kitchen sink into the cost and then pass it on to the electric payers. And number 4 is it does not leave stranded assets of the nuclear plant or the 2 coal power plants. It answers every single question. There is 0 reason for the City of Vero Beach to continue to hold people hostage. You need to help these people. They can't do it anymore. They can't afford to fight the legal battle with the City of Vero Beach. They need help, and that has to come from the positive activities of this council, this county commission. Yes, you can help, and I sure hope that you do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone? Yes, come on up, sir, and then you're next.
Thank you. J. Rock Tonkel, 5055 North Harbor Drive, Grand Harbor. First of all, if I could, and it's after the fact, but when I first came to town 12 years ago and was elected to the position of the executive director of the hospital district, I had the privilege and the pleasure of working for 2 or 3 years with Alan Plakovich. He's a man of great intellect, integrity, honesty, and I think you've made an outstanding choice, and I congratulate you.
I'd agree with that.
You need to gavel him out of order, Mr. Chairman.
I think we made a good choice, but Alan may be regretting applying.
Well,
still waiting.
That's a private conversation he and I will have.
2 months in.
I want to talk just for a brief moment about the utilities. I think most of the points have been covered. I got involved in this about 6 months ago, and was able to organize a group of about 1,300 citizens in Grand Harbor, 1,000 of whom are forced to use city utilities. 300 families, because of the grid that was laid out many years ago, had the advantage of having power provided by Florida Power and Light. This disparity led to the passage of a resolution which we've shared with the city officials calling basically for the absence of the transfer of funds to the general fund, coming under the control of PSC, et cetera, et cetera. The disturbing thing is the city basically has ignored the ignition. They will not and refuse to get into any kind of serious debate about this issue. It's encouraging to see, even with your limitations, the county taking a lead in establishing at least the forum for the discussion to be held at the advisory committee and at this level. I can't think of anything that's a more important public debate, at least for those of us who reside in the county and have no representation in this matter at the city. It's crucial that you, within your limited powers in this particular issue, continue to help create the environment for discussion and debate as you're doing today. This is a powerful, powerful presentation. The facts, I believe, after study, are conclusive and appropriate. And I would hope the one thing that you might consider would be to issue an invitation to the city manager to come up with an economic model to present to the citizens, not only in their own forum, but this forum, so that in fact a group of objective commissioners and citizens can make a judgment about the appropriateness of selling the utility, which I think will be an overwhelming conclusion once the facts are totally known and we can get, quote, if there is another side to the story, and I don't think there is, a presentation of a corresponding economic model. The only other thing I would suggest is that we continue to create an environment where Florida Power and Light feels welcome to make a not only a presentation but ultimately a bid for the sale of the public utility. I appreciate your concern, your involvement in this issue, and I also need to say that you set an example with the city county administrator and the rest of you in terms of fiscal responsibility. I only wish that you transfer that sentiment to the city officials who seem to basically ignore the basic tenets of sound fiscal management. Thank you very much.
I have one question for you, sir, before you go in, Commissioner Davis. One of the points the city brings up is that they feel their system has better reliability and that they provided faster recovery after the hurricanes. Your community is kind of in a unique position. Was there any difference in restoration of service after the Francis and Jean hurricanes?
Good question.
Well, not that I'm aware of, and I think we are a good test case. That is such a subjective kind of opinion, but basically in terms of the discussions I've had with residents in Grand Harbor, this was not an issue. The city certainly was responsive and should be congratulated on that. So was Florida Power and Light. I think that is a consideration, but the least important consideration. Florida Power and Light has an established record of being able to serve thousands and thousands of residents throughout the state of Florida. And by the way, I happen to personally believe that if you place any merit in the scale of business and new technologies, it's going to be Florida Power and Light, not a freestanding sole municipal utility who basically is going to be able to meet the needs of this community in the future.
Commissioner Davis,
yes,
you have a
Mr.
question?
Conkle, just real quick.
Yes.
How would you suggest that we start any kind of a dialogue with FP&L like you're talking about? I understand what you're saying. I'd love to say, hey, can y'all help us out in this some fashion? But now we've got out on the street a model that nobody shot holes in yet that says anywhere from $300 million to free still is benefiting the taxpayers of Indian River County. And I don't know where would we start? Would we get with Indian River Shores and what they found out with our franchise agreements, or what do you suggest?
I'd like to think about that. I think it's an excellent question. I don't want to be premature in my response. I think that needs some consultation. First of all, I think basically simply doing what you're doing today, asking interested citizens that they have an alternative that they're proposing, a sound, legitimate alternative. At least it would, if I were an official and an officer of Florida Power and Light, would be receptive to that. I suspect there are other steps that could be taken, and if you'll give me the opportunity to consult on that issue, come back at a future meeting.
I'll follow up with you.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Commissioner Solari.
I think there's a couple paths forward which we might take. I like your idea tremendously about asking the city manager to come before us, and I'd like to see if there's board consensus to do that. I'd like to, 2 or 3 things in that. One is ask the city manager to come before us, as you've suggested, and present an economic model for the future of the Vero Beach system. And as a second part of that, ask if they would like to critique Glen Huron's model with Glen Huron here. But I'm not asking them to come to critique Glen Huron's model without them first providing their model. And it's actually just too easy to come and try to shoot holes in different things. And I'll give you one example of it. I mean, the hurricane thing. That has been their response over the years of, well, the quick hurricane response. Well, I mean, from my own point of view, I appreciate that. However, when it's a choice of whether you can live here or open a business here or get a response 2 days quicker, I think that's not important. I mean, first you have to have the ability to actually be a customer. And the rates are so disparate now that you don't even have that threshold choice. And while some of us who are better off economically have that threshold choice, there's a large percent of our community who no longer have it. A large number of people who can't move in or who are forced to move out. A number of businesses who are forced to move out. So I think that is a red herring the same way as what to do with the power plant is a red herring. And what I'd like to see is them make an economic presentation that's based on a real financial analysis, which can be picked apart the same way dozens of people have picked apart Mr. Huron's process, the same way people scolded Mr. Huron at the Utility Advisory Committee meeting, the same, to do what he's done, to stand up and take all the slings and arrows and everything else that they've tossed at him and come out smiling with the facts in their hands. But for my own part, unless the city can come forward and actually show some numbers, they're not doing what they need to do for the citizens. The second thing is, again, what you mentioned about the green. I mean, in this green age of ours, where it seems like it's practically a new religion, FP&L is going green day after day, and they offer a tremendous number of incentives. But when I went and got my new AC, I didn't get any incentive from the city of Vero Beach. I don't know what incentives the city of Vero Beach are giving me if I want to put new windows in my homes. There are multiple things that FP&L is doing to actually lower the amount of power. But there are no corresponding things on the city of Vero Beach side to lower that. So I thank you for making your comments today. I think they've added to the discussion.
If I could take 30 seconds simply to say that I certainly appreciate your observations and, more importantly, the sequence of events. I think it's absolutely essential that the city just does something that they refuse to do and have for years, and that is to present some kind of corresponding and comparative economic analysis and model for viewing and consideration by everyone. You're right, to simply find fault with the assumptions used in this economic model doesn't shed light on the bigger question and the bigger issues of long-term sale of the sale of the utility to save county residents and city ratepayers savings on their utility bill. Thank you.
No, you're not getting off the hook yet. But just, Commissioner, sorry, I know you hate taking action under presentations, so if you'd like to bring a request to the city manager back under your matters next week, we'll be glad to move that forward.
Great.
Okay, good. Commissioner Wheeler.
I'm going to go a little farther than that. I've sat here and for the last year or better listened to arguments on both sides, mostly over coffee, unofficially, and quite frankly have been frustrated and also wanting to not step out of our boundaries and being respectful of another municipality, another government, etc. And I've tried to stay kind of in the middle and neutral and just listen and understand. But based on the presentation and as Bob said, based on what Mr. Rocket just said, and the fact that 61% of the customers are county customers and also City of Indian River customers, I would like to make a motion, and Bob can vote against it if he wants to, but I would like to make a motion that we extend an invitation to the City of Vero Beach to come and show us their model, have Glenn here, Mr. Herron here, and Mr. Faraday. I don't care if we have to have a workshop, you want to do a regular meeting or whatever, but I'd really like, for my own satisfaction too, I'd really like to get to the bottom of this and understand it, because when people make, and I don't mean it to be a negative word, but when people make allegations and somebody doesn't respond to them, so you can either, it kind of leaves you with an empty bag. It's almost like, well, they'd respond if there was anything to respond to. But I would really, I think it's time to get this on the table, out in the open, and let the public look at it and look at both sides in the same room on the same day at the same time, and have those questions asked of both sides. And the only reason I'm doing this is because, well, I'm curious, but we do represent the majority of those customers. And I think that gives us the ability to extend an invitation to the City of Vero Beach. So I'd like to make a motion that we do that and find out when we can set this up and what it's going to be. Probably ought to be a workshop, because I think it'll be a half-a-day event at least.
I'd like to second that. But
I will second that.
I did it first. And that's because this isn't an action item that we're taking, so I'm happy to second it. But I would like to send an invitation out for them first, in the same way that Mr. Rand made his presentation today, for them to make their presentation of the economic model.
That's my intent. That's what I asked.
Okay. And then, after that, to set up a workshop where we discuss both models.
I'd like to do it all at once. I see no advantage to doing it piecemeal.
Okay, the advantage I see is just basic fairness. I mean, Mr. Rand's model has been out there for a couple months now.
That's a good point.
No, I'd spot him the advantage if they wanted. Mr. Rand. Seriously, I mean, I'd seriously spot the advantage, because I don't think that the city's going to come up with a model that's going to be meaningful. So I'll let Mr. Rand answer that if he would, if he wants to do it at the same time, or have a chance to actually look at the model, because I know how difficult it is for us to sit up here and look at economic spreadsheets and everything else like that and pick them apart and understand them in real time.
Well, he's a lot quicker than we are.
I understand. That's why I'm giving him the option. I've seen him work and I've seen us work. My money's on him.
If they've got a model, it should be public information to boot.
I'll do whatever it is you want me to do. If you want me to be here for a workshop, I'll do that. If you want me to be here to answer the questions to the model that they may present, I'll do that too. So
I could be wrong.
Whatever your pleasure is.
I don't get the impression that you'd be caught off balance by anything they present new. If that's the case, and I'm just looking to get through this thing and get some answers to make a logical, legitimate decision on, for instance, whether we should go as a friend to the Public Service Commission or not.
Can I make one quick point, and I'll do this through the public side, my public comment capacity. This reliability question, and Mr. O'Brien, thank you for answering. Thank you for raising that question. That is the thing that the City of Vero Beach wants to talk about most and foremost, is reliability, how fast they are. I'll make one point. If FP&L is so bad, we have 50,000 customers in the county on FP&L. If they're so bad and their reliability is so poor, how come they're not here packing this chambers? How come they're not running down to the City of Vero Beach saying, I want the City of Vero Beach electric power. I want to pay 35% more for that mythical reliability. They don't show up because FP&L is extremely reliable.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Davis.
No, I think, and the reason why I was so eager to second that motion is to move this all forward. And you talk about the 61% of the residents, county residents that are being affected outside the city limits of Vero Beach. I really think we're overlooking what effect this has on the school district, which affects everybody's taxes, which is countywide. And quite frankly, half your tax bill goes to the Indian River County School Board. And a part of that goes directly into paying Vero Beach utilities. I think this is a countywide issue that needs to be addressed. And so that's why I'm so eager to move forward with this. And secondly, to deal with the issue of reliability or during the hurricanes. I remember back in 1992, I was trying to sell, had a fruit broker buying fruit from me, and he wanted a late picking date. And it was after, and I was concerned about whether or not we just had the freeze of 1989-90. And I was concerned, with a late picking date like that, what's going to happen? And he said, listen, he says, you can't live or you can't run a business acting like you're going to have a natural disaster or catastrophe every year. It can't be done. And that's no different than what I'm hearing here with the reliability issue and the hurricanes. We cannot live in this county like we're going to have an emergency every year and we're going to have a natural disaster like Francis, Jean, Charlie, Ivan. That's abnormal.
Yeah, and we want to lose $20 million a year plus doing, for that possibility of being, 2 days faster, maybe?
My point. And I'm not going into this hurricane season thinking we're going to have a hurricane. Yeah. I'm just not going to start that process, and it'd be foolish to do so.
I think you also have to keep in mind that we're 495 square miles, and the city's 10 square miles. So, it's a lot bigger job for FP&L. A lot more miles to cover.
Right. Commissioner Wheeler, your motion, is it for just a presentation or just go ahead and schedule a workshop?
I'd like to schedule a workshop with the city's model. They can make their presentation and open to questions. Mr. Herring can make his presentation. Dr. Faraday, open to questions and public input, and that would be my motion. The other thing, and I'm assuming they would be here, but I would like our financial people here. So if I have to ask a question for something I don't understand, I'm getting an unbiased. I think that makes it as fair as you possibly can.
I do have one. I'd like to address the issue as far as what it's costing the taxpayers, because from direct ad valorem taxes countywide for this facility, is the jail on FP&L or city?
Yeah. Jails on city.
On city, and the schools inside. For us to be able to look at that.
Hospital.
The hospital.
Yeah.
Those are all extremely important issues that I think we need to air out, and that should energize the five individuals sitting up here.
Several of the schools.
I think Jason had at least all the county buildings that were under city.
Yes, we have a spreadsheet we've done where we've looked at what we've got on the city of Vero Beach, what we've got on FP&L. We could come back and show you some assumptions.
I would like also, though, that the other side of the municipal taxing entities.
Yeah, I've seen those numbers someplace in the past.
Yeah,
there's so much stuff on this, and I really am looking forward to.
And that's all on my second.
Good.
So you concur with the workshop then?
Yes, I have 2 seconds.
You probably should extend an invitation to the shores as well.
Certainly, absolutely. I think, quite frankly, we'll probably have a pretty good audience here to boot.
Yes.
Okay. Because I don't know that this has been done, and I think it's good. And
Dr. Faraday and I are happy to do what your pleasure is. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically we have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler, second from Commissioner Slurry, to request basically a workshop with the City of Vero Beach and Town of Indian River Shores to review their financial model of their electric system and to have staff present to answer any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to reiterate, I don't see this as a county commission trying to, if it passes, I assume it will, to lower the boom on the city or make them look bad. I see this as a responsibility, with the customer base being the largest in the unincorporated area, to give them a voice in dealing with the city, because they can't do it through city council meetings or through voting.
Right. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? I know, Ms. Renzi, you still want to speak. Did you have any comments on the motion?
Very briefly.
Okay, please come on up.
Thank you. Good morning. Renee Renzi, Waverly Place, Vero Beach. I just want to thank Dr. Flaherty and Mr. Herron for staying with us for the last 2 years. I've been grateful to them all that time. I was also here for the last presentation that the City of Vero Beach Utilities Director gave to that sitting board, and it was terribly, terribly confusing. And as we were leaving, I happened to be talking to Jim Gabbard, and I said, how did it get to be so complicated? He said, I don't understand it myself. So good luck. I would like to strongly endorse Mr. Wilson's suggestion that you really get behind these two gentlemen in getting to the Public Service Commission. And everything else has been said. My last comment is that it's a shame the Tea Party leader left early, because if that group really wants to have some local effect dealing with a local real problem, this is an issue they could really work on and help out. So I hope some of them out there are watching on TV and get that suggestion before their Friday meeting and say, this is an issue we need to help out on. So that's my call.
Glenn, have y'all met with some of the leadership of the Tea Party? Twice. They're on it like...
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
They also included a letter on the website in October saying to the city of Vero Beach, indicating that they believe that there needs to be a reassessment to the city utilities, etc. It's on their website.
All right. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey. Yes, sir. Come on up. Thank you. You'll be next, sir.
Good morning, I'm Jim Kirshner. I live at 24 Seagull Avenue in glorious Vero Island.
Hi, Gary.
I commend you folks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I hope that you realize that we know that you are indeed the pillars of our community. We look up to you people because you have proven yourself in the past, and you have the strength and the wherewithal to hear people like us, knowing that indeed we have a problem. We have attempted to reconcile this problem with the city for a long time. Various segments of the city have approached Mr. Gabbard and various people with no response whatsoever. I know that you're aware of this, and I won't go into it, but when we have utility bills exceeding house payments, when we have people that can't afford to even heat the food for their children because they have had their utilities turned off, it's a tough situation. It must be approached, and Gary, I sincerely appreciate your making the motion. We have to do something collectively, and with the power of your people, with the power of Glenn and the good doctor, it can be done. We can do this thing collectively, but I think we all know there's a problem that seems to want to be avoided, and it's time to bring that problem to a head. And again, I commend you and I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll get you here. Come on up.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is David Gregg. I live in the moorings, and I have been subject to electric outages. One of you gentlemen asked what the result was during the hurricanes. In the moorings, my condominium was out for, I believe it was 2 days. If you probably recognize, we had a thunderstorm here, I think it was about a week ago. My daughter, who lives in the unincorporated areas of the county, but she is on the city power, she was out for in excess of 2 hours. But that should not mean that the city is not ineffective in handling outages. It just means that that was an example. And I know I've heard people go before the city council and say, well, we never had an outage over 20 minutes. And I sit and laugh. He may not have. Gary Wheeler knows back in 1976, John Little and I negotiated a contract to sell the electric system, which was very small at that time. And the county population was very small at that time. We had a very excellent agreement that was drawn up. It was signed by FP&L, it was signed by the mayor of the city of Vero Beach. The only reason it never came about was because the federal government had the right to approve it. And the federal government said the only way we're going to approve it is if the contract will include one additional provision. And that provision will state that FP&L will sell to the municipal authority groups. Those are about the 30 municipal people in the state of Florida. The equivalent capacity of the city of Vero Beach, 117 megawatts. from their nuclear power plant at original cost. I couldn't believe it. This was blackmail, and it never happened. FP&L wouldn't agree with it. I'm not sure if it had come to a vote I would have agreed with it, because it was truly blackmail. Now, where are we?
I'm just thankful the federal government doesn't do that type of business today.
Beg your pardon?
I said I'm just thankful the federal government doesn't blackmail people today.
I know it. I realize that. I think it's common knowledge that John Little and I made a proposal to the city of Vero Beach that we would negotiate with FP&L. They're the only logical people to buy it. But when you negotiate, you don't tell the world they're the only ones, but that's what the city did. They came out and advertised, in effect, FP&L is the only one that could buy us. And that's not what you do when you negotiate. But anyway, John Little and I said we will do it, and we will do it for no charge. The city has spent $3 million on their electric system to get out of what the problems that they had. The council has done nothing. Yesterday I submitted a letter to them and I told them, gentlemen, it's time to fish or cut bait. John Little and I will not continue to keep our sights on the possibility of completing a project which we think would be in the interests of the entire community. And so that's where we stand. But I'd like to inject one thought. The city council, what you're looking at is really the result of some ineptitude by the top people. You don't solve the problem by just looking at the result. You've got to look at what caused the result. And I think when you people vote, and I'm telling you as a member of the community that's affected, I'm going to urge you to vote to rescind your franchise agreement with the city when it comes up. I think it's 5 years from now, because that's the only way, and the sooner you do it, in my opinion, the more urgency you're going to put on the city to come to grips with their problem. And it's going to have to come from the top, not from the bottom. These guys have done a tremendous job, and I approve everything they've done. I do not. No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. And just for the record, our franchise agreement in March of 2012 is when we need to make a yes or no decision and give 5-year notice. That'll come up March of 2012. Will be that decision date.
That's for utilities or electric?
I believe it's for both.
Okay.
But that's the date by which we have to make that decision. I think the follow-up on what Mr. Gregg said is that after we have the workshop with the city, we look at the results of those and maybe have another public decision and then make the decision now, because that'll put a little more fire under.
And that includes maybe even joining the PSC complaint.
Yeah, that'll all be part of that discussion, and that's probably something.
After we get our educational process out of the way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this before we go ahead and proceed to vote? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Wheeler, second by Commissioner Slurry. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. And I guess between Alan, you and I will write up a letter and send it to the city manager. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Davis?
Well, along these same lines, before we, not to direct the staff, the county attorney, but I think it's about time he does pull himself up to speed on this, and whether he would do it under his own volition, or would like to do that under direction from this commission as far as looking into those franchise agreements before that workshop. I think it's going to be appropriate. He'd probably do that without direction from this board. So whatever the pleasure is, to see to it that we're all in unison as far as using county attorney staff time for that.
That's fine. In fact, the very first note that I wrote today is advance the FP&L issues.
I'll make that as a motion if that helps.
Second. So they'll be advanced.
And I'd like the record to show that Wesley did try to second my motion.
I did. I appreciate that, Commissioner. Thank you. Yeah, it's you and Barbara
I would have
Train,
made the dang
that
motion.
would highlight that one and paint it yellow.
Special day. You and I were making it.
All right, so motion from Commissioner Davis, second by Commissioner Sari, to instruct the county attorney to advance his homework on the FP&L and the franchise agreements with the City of Vero Beach.
Yes.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 11:25. Right. Okay, we'll come back to order. So far, we're just getting to item 6, approval of minutes. Is there a motion to move to approve?
Second. Special call meeting of February 22nd and the regular meeting of March 2nd, 2010.
Second.
Okay, we have Commissioner Sari, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Both minutes pass unanimously. Item 7, informational item. Is there any discussion on those items? Seeing none, we have completed the consent agenda. Nothing under constitutional. That takes us to 10, public items. Oh, I'm sorry. Nothing there.
Why?
Section 12, departmental matters. I, Public Works. Staff update on Sector 3 Beach Renourishment Project. Good morning, Mr. Mora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Chris Mora, Public Works Director for the county. This morning, we have an update on the Sector 3 Beach Renourishment Project. The contractor is continuing to place sand on the beach. He's currently accessing through the Turtle Trail entrance, Turtle Trail Park, and he's placing sand using that entrance in the vicinity of northern Johns Island. As of Sunday, the 11th, April 11th, he had placed approximately 207,000 cubic yards of sand, which is about 65% of the Phase 1 volume. He's got approximately 10,000 feet of dune constructed now, and 6,500 feet of that is the full construction template, which is the dune plus the berm. He's completed the area of Summer Place, Vero Disney Resort, and Sea Oaks, and he still has partially completed Golden Sands Park, Sanderling Orchid, and Wabasso Beach Park, as well as the northern Johns Island area. Looking at his production over the last couple of weeks, he's been able to keep his truck loads per day, which are shown here, at his average is 301 trucks per day. It came down a little bit once he started hauling from the Fisher Mine on 86th Avenue versus the Ranch Road Lake Mine because of the longer travel times, about 10 miles farther, 20 miles round trip. We figure now that with 73% of the contract time for Phase 1 now gone by, he's going to have to maintain at 7 days per week approximately 322 truckloads per day. Looking at the construction timeline, 73% of the time has elapsed leading up to April 30th. He's now at 65% of the volume, so he's actually made some progress, because if you probably don't recall, but the last beach update, he was at right about here, which was 63% of elapsed time and only about 49% of the sand. So the differential there of 14 percentage points, he's now got it down to about 8, difference between 65 and 73. So he's made some progress there in being able to catch up. You can see below that we have the amount of dune plus berm that's been completed, 6,500 linear feet, and the newly placed material is now on 10,000 feet of the 23,000 feet of shoreline in Phase 1. And that brings you up to date, and that concludes the beach update.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Okay. Chris, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We now move to county attorney matters. Item A, Holman Stadium use guidelines. This was deferred from the April 6th, 2010 agenda. The memorandum is dated March 30th, 2010. Mr. Plackwich.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. You will recall that the county owns and leases to minor league baseball the Holman Stadium facilities. Under that lease, the county is allowed up to 10 days per year to either use the facility or perhaps allow some other organization to use the facility in the place of the county. Earlier this year, the Tea Party, Indian River Tea Party, Inc., came forward and requested permission to use the facility. During the course of that request, it became apparent that the Tea Party, Inc. did not qualify or was not eligible for use of the facility under the guidelines that had been created and approved by the Commission. Those guidelines required that the facility could only be leased to not-for-profit 501c3 organizations, and while Indian River Tea Party, Inc. was not-for-profit, it was actually designated under 501c4. Therefore, the Tea Party withdrew its request and proceeded to contract directly with minor league baseball. But in any event, that sequence of events caused the Commission to ask me to review our guidelines and perhaps loosen them up to expand the eligible organizations that could use the facility. So I did do that, and what I ended up doing was basically taking the next logical step. In other words, currently it is not-for-profit 501c3. I eliminated the 501c3 part of that so that it is now just not-for-profit organizations. Not-for-profit organizations may or may not get designated under a 501c category. There are something like, I'm going to say 25, roughly 26 types of designations under 501c, but the way we've written it now is simply not-for-profit organizations. I also created a little bit more flexibility in the Commission and in the County Administrator to try to give you the ability to create exceptions if you chose to, and to expedite the process a little bit better as well. So that was my attempt to come back with loosening up those guidelines. That's what we have today.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Slurry.
For a number of reasons, I think loosening up these guidelines would be a bad thing, and just for a couple of them. One is, I think as a threshold thing, we probably ought to keep in mind that the Tea Party actually is going to have their April 16th event at Dodgertown. The truth of the matter is they did not even need the government's involvement in order to have that day there. And I think that we as commissioners should applaud and support this example of self-reliance. But more importantly, if we do go ahead with this, I think we're opening up a Pandora's box, which we ought not to be opening. I mean, just as I think we ought to consider the type of people that we would then have no reason to turn down. And this would include Acorn, MoveOn.org, Planned Parenthood. These are all MoveOn.org. You can laugh, but they've had a presence in Indian River County.
Are they a 501c3 though?
No, C4. This is the type of group. These are all types of groups which would not now be allowed under our policy, but which would, if we changed it, be allowed. It would also be arms to the Democrat and the Republican parties, which we then have to decide whether we wanted them before us. So it adds a tremendous political aspect to this policy, which isn't in place now. I mean, I think it's absolutely appropriate for the nonprofit 501c3 companies, but not this expanded list. And I will answer one more thing, a question that Commissioner Davis raised in the last matter, and how is Dodgertown different from the county administration building? And I think in some essential ways. The first thing is, this building is an essential part of our government. Dodgertown isn't. Running a major league or a minor league facility is not an essential part of our government. It's actually something that we did as some sort of piece of economic development, which may or may not be fine, but it's no part of essential government. And what we did was buy a commercial piece of property and then leased it out to a private group. That's fine. But I see this as an infringement on their property rights, which is unnecessary and unwarranted. And I'd ask if any of us had, say, rental units, and we've rented a rental unit to somebody, would we come back 2 weeks later and say, look, I know we rented this to you, but we want to use it for a dinner party? And we wouldn't, because we wouldn't expect us to trample on those property rights. So given that, first of all, it was unnecessary. The private sector is quite able to discuss this with the private sector and get a good result, as we see from the Tea Party. Given that it opens a Pandora's box of groups that I don't want to come in before me and asking for government assistance, like Acorn, MoveOn.org, and others, and given that I don't believe we ought to be infringing on the property rights of people with whom we've made lease agreements, I'm going to make a motion that we do not change the policy at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second from Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Davis, discussion?
I agreed with the first half of what Commissioner Slurry was saying, but the second half, whenever he started to talk about how if we leased a piece of property, then we'd come back 2 weeks later. Well, when you lease a piece of property, Commissioner Slurry, you lease that to them them with a bundle of rights. Inside those bundle of rights are agreed upon in writing, hence the lease agreement. The lease agreement that we have with Dodgertown or with minor league baseball has some lessed out exceptions to that process, and that is 10 days of usage. And so we're not going back to them and asking them for something after we've already leased it to them to do something outside the lease. That's just simply not the case, and too far of a jump beyond logic. But in that process, I agree with you that we're really opening up something perhaps that if they want to work, a 501c4 organization or entity would like to go to and deal directly with minor league baseball, I think that's appropriate, and I will support your motion. But as far as the example of leasing it out, did have some exceptions.
Mr. Plackridge, are there other 501c designations that we might want to include? That would be, I know there's non-profits and then not-for-profits. Is there a designation difference there?
Well, there's not a difference between non-profit and not-for-profit. Those are synonymous terms. There are, as I say, roughly 27 categories within the IRS code of 501c organizations. I will tell you that 501c3 pretty much stands apart from all of the others. 501c3 is what you would view as charities. The specific designation is religious, educational, charitable, scientific, literary, testing for public safety, etc., prevention for the cruelty of children or animals organizations. That's the heading of 501c3. C4, which is the very next one, is the types of things that you see with the Tea Party. It's civic leagues, social welfare organizations, local associations of employees. It's usually a group that is advocating it's advocating some message. Yeah. Just like, as you saw with the Tea Party group. So I don't really think the answer is to expand it, to try to pick and choose among the basket of 501cs. I think C3 stands separate as charities. The others all have some interest that they have.
Commissioner Fleischer, then back to you, Commissioner Fleischer.
Mr. Blockbush, thank you for the clarification, and I will support the motion based on a few facts. One in particular is that you just mentioned advocacy. And going beyond what any group is valued upon as far as advocacy, I don't know if you want a direct correlation with government, as we discussed at last week's meeting. In addition, we have but 10 days that are in our ability to extend. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes.
So we're looking at 10 days and expanding this to such a value. We'd probably have to hire somebody just on the management, on the applications of what will come forward for the usage of this arena. And I think the spirit of having those 10 days originally were for if we wanted to have a nonprofit event or an action that we deemed allowable to go forward in the arena. I think that's what those 10 days were for, and now we're widening open the scope where we're probably going to have a business agent just for the applications.
Commissioner, sorry. I'd just like to respond again to Commissioner Davis's. I didn't mean to nitpick this like an attorney or anything like that, but I'm going to. Okay. Because again, let's put ourselves back in the context of where we were when we negotiated with Dodgertown. We negotiated a lease agreement, and that was effective May 26, 2009, and gave certain property rights to the minor league baseball, including, quote, except as otherwise provided in this agreement, minor league baseball shall have the exclusive right and obligation to use, manage, operate the facility in its sole discretion in accordance with the terms and purposes of the agreement. Then in section 6.04, quote, the county's use of Holman Stadium and the practice field specifies certain rights that the county retained. One of these rights was to the right to, quote, use the Holman Stadium and or practice fields for up to 10 days per lease year at no charge to the county. That's on page 13. Okay, now the lease agreement was silent as to the type of use, but does specify Harvest Festival by name. In addition to this name, at the time of the lease, the county policy was to limit the usage to 501c3 charities. So in the context of those discussions, I believe Craig Cowan was here, and he said, somebody said, well, Harvest Festival uses it. We need to keep the use for Harvest Festival. And Craig Cowan here, trying to work with the county, said, fine, Harvest Festival, good. And as I remember, any other uses that we considered at that time would have been charitable uses like that. And Craig Cowan, trying to be accommodative, said, yes, that's right. And when I was up here thinking about it, I was certainly thinking about charitable uses. I wasn't thinking of MoveOn.org, Acorn, or the Tea Party. So, given the policy that was in place at the time, the county's policy, and the context, I think that expanding this would actually be a unilateral expansion on our part of the contract in interference with their property rights. And yes, they might agree, but again, why fight the county? What's the upside? Which is why I believe in almost all contractual negotiations, the county ought to be more careful in the way that it exercises its power, not less careful after the fact of the contract. So that's my response to you, Commissioner.
All I gathered from that is you were in favor of my second.
Commissioner Slurry, Mr. Plaquich had some other changes in here that kind of cleaned things up. Is your motion to deny all of the changes, or just the Section A, the eligibility, and not approve what he has here and go back to the groups must be not-for-profit, Section 501c3?
Well, quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, when I was preparing for this, I focused more on the say no to the expansion, and I didn't really want to speak on the others, so if I could, I'd limit my motion to just not expanding it beyond the 501c3, and then allow any other commissioner to make a motion in favor of any of the other changes if they'd like.
Okay, so just for the record, your motion is to deny the changes in Section A. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, along those lines, I guess really, Mr. Plaquich, with us not accepting the expanded 501Cs, the remaining verbiage and language, did you still find that helpful or beneficial in tightening up in the intent of what we were trying to get accomplished with our 10 days?
I think that the changes you should make one way or the other appear at the end of paragraph D.
What page is that?
Very top of page 2.
Page 81 in your backup.
Thank you.
Which just expanded out the indemnity obligation of the user to include not only damage or destruction to the stadium, but also to include liabilities associated with personal injury or death. That was certainly to protect us. And over, excuse me, on item K, that's really just the procedure by which people make application. You see, it required 120 days prior to the date of use, and some organizations just don't get around to it that quickly, I don't think. So that part, I thought, made sense, again, regardless of whether you expand the organizations. There was a minor change in L, which is on page 4, again, should be changed. The more difficult question comes on P, which creates discretion to waive requirements. Now, there are two sentences. One is the county commission has waived discretion to waive any requirement. You may not want to go down that path because it may take you right back into the dilemma that Commissioner Solari mentioned. The second sentence, however, I think does make sense, which is the county administrator having discretion to waive procedural time period requirements, things like that. So if someone came to us 80 days before the event, would we really be forced to say, we're sorry, but you didn't come here 90 days before?
Yeah, I like that dash of common sense.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to add all those things that the attorney added, less the sentence, the county commissioner shall have the discretion to waive any requirement of the use guidelines when it determines that such waiver is in the best interest of the county.
And I'm happy to have your motion agree with my second.
Okay.
I do try to follow your lead, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So where we sit right now is under item A, eligibility, that we are not approving the suggested wording and to remain as a not-for-profit, Section 501c3. We are accepting the wording changes in item D. We are accepting the wording changes in Section K. We are accepting the wording changes in Section L. And in section P, we are not approving the first two sentences, but approving the three following sentences.
It's just the first sentence that you're not approving in P.
First two lines, okay, yeah, first sentence.
First two lines, right.
Okay. Is everybody clear and followed along? Okay. Any discussion? And that was from Commissioner Sari, second by Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to item B, the Deputy County Attorney and Assistant County Attorney employment contracts. Again, this was deferred from April 6, 2010. The memorandum is dated March 24, 2010. Again, Mr. Polakowicz.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In our county attorney office, we have three attorneys, one being me, and then we have a deputy and we have an assistant county attorney. By code, the deputy and assistant are required to be at-will contract employees. And basically what that phrase means is they are to have a contract, and the contract is to provide that they can be terminated at will. In other words, with or without cause. And the contracts presently provide that they can be terminated on 30 days' notice. That distinguishes them from virtually all other county employees, because virtually all other county employees fall under our administrative policy, which basically gives a progressive disciplinary process available to all other employees before they can be terminated. That situation, well, as a result of them not having the progressive disciplinary benefits, the prior county attorney believed that they should have some level of job protection, and the level of job protection that was created was a severance benefit. And the severance benefit was 1 month of salary for each year of service with the county, capped at 12 months. And that amount can get pretty high, as you saw when an assistant county attorney left last fall. On January 19, before I was hired, this board passed a motion saying that the county attorney shall not renew any of the existing contracts for the deputy or assistant county attorneys until I get on board and I have a chance to review the situation and I have a chance to make a recommendation. So I came on board, I did review the situation, and I'm now making a recommendation today. The first point that I want to make is what I specifically did not do was try to talk to the commissioners, understand what you wanted, and then simply create a contract that reflected what you told me you wanted. Because if I did that, I would not be giving you my recommendation. I would simply be telling you what I thought you wanted to hear, and that's not what you asked me to do. So I did sit down and I did analyze it in terms of what I thought was best. And the way I came at it was, I started with the notion of what exactly am I trying to achieve in the county attorney's office. And the answer is, I'm trying to achieve the highest level of legal representation that I can give to the county, always in a timely manner. That's my objective. So then I sat back and I said, well, what do I need in a contract to help get me there? And I decided that I needed a couple of things. Number one, I need something that is a bit of an inducement that I can recruit top-notch people should I need to recruit. I can retain top-notch people should I want to retain them. And lastly, that I can terminate people that I just don't think are leading to that final objective that I want. And I want to be able to terminate them promptly. I don't want to go through a 3 or 6 or 9 month disciplinary process to achieve that termination. But at the same time, I fully appreciate that if I have that right, I don't want to create a large financial burden on the county. But at the same time, I think that there is some validity in the notion that if I say to a recruit or a present attorney that you're not going to have any rights to job security, I can terminate you anytime for any reason, I think it's fair to say back to that person, but if I terminate you without cause, then you will be entitled to some level of a severance benefit. So I actually thought quite long and hard as to what was a reasonable severance benefit. What I ended up doing was taking the existing formula and changing it quite radically. I basically doubled the period of time that you needed to accrue a month of severance pay, and I also capped it at much lower levels, 3 months for assistant, 4 months for deputy. And again, that's compared to the current levels of 12 months, so it's a very substantial drop for these individuals. In the end, I felt like that gave me the best chance of recruiting people, retaining people, letting people go, giving a reasonable level of job security to people, but at the same time not imposing a significant financial burden on the county. So that was the contract form I came up with. That's my recommendation. I have no pre-existing illusion that it is or is not acceptable to the board, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, let me start down here. Commissioner Fleischer, anything?
No, it's not.
Okay, Commissioner Davis?
Well, and this was clearly something that concerned me, and whenever I learned about it, I mean, it's kind of like it was almost, I was blindsided by the fact that we had assistants with that long of a severance package, and clearly didn't set well with me. I applaud Mr. Polakowicz coming in with his severance, and it's reasonable. I mean, I think it's something that is doable. The delicate dilemma here is we've got something that's kind of in place, and now we're trying to change it, perhaps. And I don't know really, even going into this, whether we could change it in midstream or not. But what I was trying to do, just like you started out, Mr. Polakowicz, is you're trying to achieve a goal, and that goal is to do legal work as best you possibly can in as timely fashion. I appreciate that from your standpoint. From my standpoint, what I'm trying to do is create policy for future generations as a county commissioner. And so I do see the difference between the hired at will and the necessity that you have in order to be able to run an efficient office. And if this is the balance that has to take place in order for us to move forward, it's something that I probably can support.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Story?
I'd also like to say that I think that Alan's done a very good job with this. I also like the way he explained it. I thought it was very articulate, and I'm glad to actually hear the overall goal of our legal department. And given the parameters of it, quite happy with it. I'm not saying it would have been exactly what I would drawn up or not, but Alan probably ended up with a better job than what I would have done if I had done it. So, also, as far as Commissioner Davis's problem, I would guess that this would take in effect at the end of each year's contract.
Well, here's where we are on that issue. As I say, we have two attorneys that we're talking about. Their current contracts are annual contracts, one-year contracts, so they come up for renewal at the end of each year. With respect to the assistant county attorney, his contract did come up for renewal in March, early March, and it has not been renewed pending this decision. If you agree with my recommendation, then the new contract will be materially less favorable to him than his old contract. That will give him the right under his old contract to treat it as essentially a termination. And he will be able, if he chooses, to leave and take the severance benefit at that time, which is 3 months for him, 3 months and a little bit more. As for the deputy county attorney, his contract does not come up for renewal until September. So what will happen there is, as we approach September, he will understand that if he wishes to be employed beyond his existing contract, then if he wants to be employed beyond September, excuse me, the new form of contract will be the contract going forward. And again, he will have that right, if he chooses to treat the less favorable contract as a non-renewal in effect, and he will have the right to leave if he chooses and take the severance, which in his case will be about 7 months of severance.
Wow. For my whole part, I think that's a fine way to proceed.
Okay. Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I got a couple. If you terminate them with cause according to the contract, I'm looking for it. I read this last week. What's the severance?
Yeah, if they are terminated with cause, then there is no severance at all.
And do you have to build a case if you terminate with cause according to this agreement?
What you would have to do is we would have to take a position that we are terminating with cause. Cause has several definitions, and we would have to certainly have a reasonable case that there is cause as defined in the agreement, and if so, then the termination would happen on 30 days' notice, and there would be no termination paid. That doesn't stop the terminated attorney turning around and filing some type of claim with the county saying, wait a minute, you really did not have good cause, therefore you really do owe me 1 or 2 or 3 months of severance.
Yeah, I'm opposed to contracts. The only contract that I really could support would be one like yours, 30 days, and and in 30 days, if you're terminated without cause, you get 30 days. If you're terminated with cause, you don't, or if you resign. And I'm opposed to this. I think what this does, in a sense, is when you take an at-will employee and you call him at-will, you're either at-will or you're not. But when you come and you become, in most cases, if you're an at-will employee, you have more protection, more benefit than the people with property rights have. And I can see where it would be a little more difficult to follow the guidelines that you have to follow to terminate somebody. But I also think that, first, at this level, I don't think that happens frequently across the country, probably. It also, I think a lot of it is, and it's not a reflection on where you're coming from, Alan, but I also think that it's a case where, government's got an easy way out of getting rid of somebody without exposing anything to the public, etc. And to me, we've given them back their property rights in this contract. And if you, there was one mention in here about one of the examples, somebody was terminated, an assistant attorney was terminated in 2000. When was that? Oh,
2009.
Yeah, and that was very expensive. If they'd have been terminated with cause, or the job just been eliminated because it no longer exists and you have to let someone go, that's kind of without cause, other than the fact that position doesn't exist anymore. That would have cost us about $15,000 versus with a contract, $121,000.
That's what predicated me bringing this forward too, though. I mean,
I agree, and I've been consistent, and I still disagree with contracts. And the reason that I did support, I think I made the motion for Mr. Polakowicz's contract, is because of I think they're a different retirement system in that position of being an officer such as Mr. Barrett is. And your contract was so clean, so simple, it's almost a non-contract. And but I plan on not supporting this, and I could go into more detail, but I've been through this every year for the last 5 years with contracts, and I just don't believe in them. I think if you're at will, then you ought to be at will, and there shouldn't be any protection. And if you're not at will, you ought to have property rights and be treated like every other employee. I would venture to bet you that people understanding a contract, if you want to be an at-will employee, that probably 90% of the employees in this county would prefer to be an at-will rather than a regular employee with property rights. So I appreciate and I applaud your even paring this down, and obviously the overall, I'm just tickled to death with your work. So this isn't a reflection on you. It's just my philosophy when it comes to contracts, and I won't support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Wheeler. Commissioner Fletcher?
Mr. Chairman, for the councilor, just for discussion, if you were to ask someone to terminate their employment without cause, we're looking at how many months severance for the deputy attorney? 4 months.
Under the recommended contract in front of you?
Recommended is
existing contract.
Well, recommended is going to be 4, and the current is 6, and he's on the cusp of having 7.
Yeah, the current he will, as I understand it, mature to 7 years in September. Excuse me, which amounts to the 7 months of severance. Under the existing contract, if it is signed in September, as I understand it, he will then drop down to 3 months. A year later, he will complete 8 years, and at that point will cap out at 4 months of severance.
So if that's the case at the current salary, what would be the dollar amount that we'd be writing a check for the severance of the deputy attorney?
If he does not accept this and leaves under his existing contract, well, I can't give you anything specific. I can tell you roughly it would be, I'm going to say $72,000 plus some other things. And those may amount to, I don't know, I know Jim Sexton's here, but another $10,000 or $15,000, I'm guessing.
I think it was somewhere around $90,000.
Okay, that sounds about right then.
Okay. And if this contract were to go forward today, we're looking at 4 months, so we're probably looking at about $70,000.
Well, you'd be 4 months, which is 1/3 of a year, which is roughly $35,000 plus, again, the extras. Now, when I say the extras, they would be a little bit less than the $5,000 to $10,000 I mentioned earlier. So you'd be roughly at $50,000, let's say.
$50,000.
$50,000.
And then you mentioned by code, we move forward towards an at-will employee. What does it take to remove that process?
30 days. Oh, to remove the code? Well, you would have to amend your ordinance. Your ordinance currently reads that all attorneys hired after March 2000 shall be at-will contract employees.
And we also have I just wanted this as part of public discussion. You have a 30-day severance package.
I'm not sure we call that a severance package.
I don't know. Yeah, I told you you're probably better off without the contract.
I made and I've explained to a couple of you, I made some individual decisions, which were that I wanted to make the point to you that I'm not relying on severance or anything else. I'm relying on my ability to stay hired here. And 30 days notice if you don't like me and I'm gone.
As it should be.
What would that check be if we had to write a check to you as you or we choose to say goodbye?
Well, you wouldn't have to write any check for anything, assuming I worked the final 30 days, which I would certainly be contractually obligated to do. You would give me 30 days notice. At the end of 30 days, I would clean up my desk and leave. Now, at that point, if I had any accrued vacation or sick time, I wouldn't be entitled to any sick time, so I got to be here 10 years before I actually get paid any sick time. So if I had any unused vacation, you'd pay me for that. That would be the only amount.
And if we chose not to have you an employee for those 30 days, we'd be writing you a check for your absence and non-service for?
Well, you would owe me 1/12 of $150,000. So roughly 13,000 maybe.
Wow. And
12 and a half, I guess.
That's how your contract got approved. Great value to the citizens and great value to this commission and some value to you. And now I'm looking at you having the most recent contract approved at that value, yet we're still negotiating to look at writing someone a check for $50,000 as opposed to $90,000. It still's not back down to the value that you got this to, a contract that you ought to be commended for. I realize that, yes, some of the attorneys have worked during this process towards that contract, but we had the same process in just a few years ago about another contract that we had to painfully not discuss and write the check. And I really feel uncomfortable about it. I really do feel uncomfortable about writing such a large check for the convenience of being able to sever someone's employment, which may or may not be appropriate. I'd rather see the employees all be treated the same and have property rights. That seems to be a huge challenge. I mean, I appreciate the work that you put into it, and we did not discuss it. I wanted to discuss it before the public as well. I just find it a tremendous challenge to negotiate, to have at any time write a $50,000 check.
Just if I could make two quick comments on that. Number one, I don't think it's fair to the deputy and assistant county attorneys to place upon them the contract that I chose to enter into with you. As I say, I'm at a different point in my career. I'm at a different point in my life, and if you were to terminate me, it would not create financial hardship to me. The assistant and the deputy are younger, and almost always will be younger than the county attorney. And I think they're at a different point in their life where financial security in the event of termination is something that is of significance to them. And the second point I would make is, while in your example you use the number of 50,000, that is the maximum that it could ever get, because it's only the deputy attorney that gets that high, and number two, it caps out at that amount. So in other words, whether he's here eight years, he has to get to 8 years before that number applies, and whether he's here for another 10 or 15, up to 20 or 25 years, that number does not increase really. I just wanted to make those 2 points.
Okay. Jim, from a human resources perspective, is there anything in the proposed contract that you have any issue with, just from a human resources point of view?
Not necessarily. The Jim Sexton, Human Resources Director, as long as they understand what the term means when they talk about the payout of sick and vacation leave, as long as the two parties understand exactly what that means and they can help us out with the interpretation of that. The way I understand it is, it looks like there's kind of a window of benefit where they'll keep what's currently accrued under sick time. We'll take a snapshot of that. In the future, upon separation, if they have less than 10 years of service, they would still be eligible for that payout that they've kind of accrued to date. And then if they go over the 10 years, they'd get up to 50% of their leave, up to 240 hours, like the general policy is. So as long as the two parties understand what it means, then we're good with it.
Okay. And Alan, have you had that discussion with the...
Yes.
Okay. Bill, would you like to comment at this time?
I don't know. Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. Gentlemen, I understand that you don't like the idea of severance. I understand that you don't like writing a check to someone that you'd like to be able to dismiss. That's why I'm really not objecting to the addition of the termination for cause clause that now appears in the contract that you're asking me to sign. Kind of in a matter of fairness, when I first came here, Mr. Collins' contract with the board had the severance clause in there as far as 1 month for each year of service. That clause was just passed on down to the assistant county attorneys at that time. It was different than the executive aide's contract. If you remember, her contract had a clause in there that severance could be invoked if one or more commissioners had pressured her to resign or expressed dissatisfaction with her performance. From a fairness, and that was never in my contract. From a fairness standpoint, I would not like to go backwards. Normally, if you're satisfied with my performance of my job, or if I were a professional athlete of some sort, if I do a good job, my contract would be renewed on the same or higher terms. Here, I'd like to see my contract renewed on about the same terms. I feel that I'm giving up the opportunity to receive severance if I'm terminated at will, but certainly I would not like to go backwards and bargain away something that I already have.
Okay. Commissioner Slaughter?
I'm going to go ahead at this time and move the attorney's recommendation for the new contracts. And I'm basing this motion basically on a couple things. One is, there's something fundamentally different between the work product of an attorney's office and other units of our government. And that doesn't say that one unit is more important or less important, but the work product is different. For a lot of the jobs that we have, you've got some objective criteria on which you can make a decision to, say, fire somebody at will. But when the work product is basically intellectual in nature, it's much more difficult to articulate the reason why you want to no longer be working with somebody. The other thing is, with a lot of upper-level areas, when a new person comes in, he ought to have some flexibility in how he or she runs the office and with whom he or she works. And that is something I think that professional people are always at risk for. And if, with this change of the attorney's office, if the people who are working there today don't want to accept the terms of the new head, then they've got the existing contract which they can exercise and go out. But I like the reasons which the county attorney articulated for the change in the contract. I think they work well for the citizens of the city of Indian River County, and that they move in the direction of giving the commissioners, for the most part, what we have articulated in the past. So for those reasons, I'll move the attorney's recommendation.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I think when you talk about work product, that's why one job pays 30 or 40 or 50,000 a year, and another job pays 100, 150, or 200,000 a year. And I think it's in compensation is where you pick up on the work product, not property rights versus contract. Bill did say something that I'm sympathetic toward, and that's going backwards. If there were some way to accept these contracts, but either not accept any in the future or have it come back to the commission at that time, if so be it. And I don't know if you can do that through the ordinance. They have been given something prior to this commission. The standards were set, and I'll honor that. And so I feel a little differently based on what you said, Bill. But I do not like contracts, and I do not like extending this forever. I think we're married to something now, and it's just like, if you talk about building a case, too, to terminate someone with property rights, in this contract, it says that cause shall mean the following: a material breach of this contract, which that's up here someplace. The rest of them, though, are a serious breach of county policy or ordinance, violation of state or federal law reflecting a serious lack of honesty, character, integrity, etc. So you got property rights back in again, and if somebody did this even with property rights that was a flagrant violation of law or whatever, you've got the right to terminate them. Let them take you to court and sue them. Let a jury decide if that's what they want to do. But I could be, if there was some way, and I don't know if it can be written in such a way or however you do it, but if we close the door on contracts and readdress this, if you hire new attorneys, I will compromise and go with this, because I don't think it's right to take something away from somebody that they've anticipated and have done. Although there is, and this is taking something away. It's reducing our obligation, which I think is a compromise on your part too.
Commissioner Davis,
and that's.
Not again.
I know. I hesitate to say it. And I really think that this is accomplishing a lot of what I wanted to get done with coming forward with Mr. Polakowicz's recommendation. And the reason why is the assistant contracts, they did not come before us necessarily for approval, maybe information, but clearly this, because of the ordinance, it allowed the county administrator and the county attorney to be able to grant these. And some of them were a whole lot more lucrative than I ever thought. And not just with the amount of severance, but also the senior management designation and some of those other things. But really, they're expensive. They're very expensive. And from what I understand, I would like to look into exactly what else has been granted out to, and not that we can do anything about the ones that are in front of us today, other than try to rein them in as best we possibly can. But for moving forward, and I would agree with Commissioner Wheeler if there wasn't. I guess there's really not a motion on the floor right now because it doesn't have a second. But I'm not chairman to make that decision.
I can continue my motion then, to take into Commissioner Wheeler's problems. I mean, we can easily say that up to, with the existing contracts, they have the rights they have up to today in terms of severance. but they don't increase any more beyond what the new policy would be. For instance, what are Mr. DeBraw's today? You said 7
I
months?
understand, come September, it'll be 7 months.
My anniversary is the beginning of July, so it would be that.
Okay. Either 6 or 7 months for
That would cap him at 4 months, though, when he reaches the...
If we approve this, yeah. 4 months.
Yeah.
And the assistant attorneys, right now?
Right now, he's at 3 months.
Okay.
Under this agreement, he would be at 1 month.
Okay, that we cap him at 3 months, which is where we end up after 6 years as opposed to 3 years, I think.
And I'm good with that. Fundamentally, though, again, going back, I wanted to create policy just like you wanted to create a good department, and the policy being, I think the intent, I can almost count to 3 here at least, of something very conservative as far as a severance package, a 30-day. For new hirees coming in, and this is not only just for the county attorney's office. I'd like to create this policy countywide for anybody that can issue a contract. I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to lock that down right now for future generations and future commissioners.
And with that included, in Bob's, if I understand that properly, I would second the motion. And I just want to say again that the reason for that and the reason for my compromise is because I think, as Bill pointed out, and I hadn't thought about, going backwards, I think that there's give on your part too. I see this as a compromise agreement between reducing what the contract currently is and moving forward. But again, I would like not to see contracts be a part of it in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so just so that I'm clear on that motion, are you saying that the proposed contract would be acceptable for the current deputy and assistant county attorneys?
Capped at where it is today.
Or anybody. There's only 3 of the contracts out there, correct? Is there only 3 contracts that...
In my department, there's 2. Well, there's 2 plus myself.
Well, no, I don't mean y'all. I'm aware of those. I believe there's only 3 other ones countywide, correct?
Al and I have a contract. The 2 assistants have a contract, and my assistant has a contract. Now, my assistant's contract is a lot less lucrative than the assistant attorneys.
But yours makes up for the difference.
Mine makes up for the difference. And I think in that contract, it says that they get 1 for every year of service. He gets 1 month severance up to 6 months.
I'd like to kind of see all these kind of drawn into line for some parity of some kind, if at all possible. I think that's no different.
And actually, that's about that's just about where he'll sit where this one does. His is doesn't have all that other language in it. That's how it was.
And that's what I'm after.
Very simple.
A, I'm after some parity in those that do have contracts, and B is I'm after some kind of ceiling in the contracts to see to it that they don't get out of line like I felt like they perhaps have in the past with the year severance and some of the other things. What concerns me is, as a commissioner, I don't approve those contracts, and they are a long-term liability in my opinion. I don't want to run your departments and to do the negotiations with the people that y'all need as your right-hand people. I'm good with that, but I think the taxpayers deserve some level of protection to say y'all can't step outside of this box whenever you're giving these contracts.
What you're saying is you want a template.
Yes.
First of all, the contract that my assistant had was a template that was approved years ago and only went up to 6 months. You're saying that you want that template of the contract that you've got in front of you.
No, I'm thinking we want it more restrictive than this. I think we're saying
30 days.
Everything that we have here in front of us was done several years ago with prior commissions and a prior legal department. And I think that the consensus among this board is that's a little bit more lucrative than what we're willing to do in today's times.
What you're basically saying is you're willing to grandfather in the existing employees that have a contract.
No.
No.
With this. Okay. Let's take 2 things. Let's see if we can agree on a contract for future hires. Okay, is this template what we have here in front of us, is this what we want for future hires?
Right.
And from my point of view, I haven't commented yet, I agree pretty much 100% with everything Mr. Plackwich has said, his reasoning why. It's his department to run, and if he feels this is the balance he needs to hire quality people, retain quality people, but give him the flexibility to get out, if he feels that there's an issue he needs to address, I think this is a good balance. So as far as going forward with future hires. I think this does exactly what we asked the county attorney to do. It is his department to run, and it does cap the county's liability, the taxpayers' liability going forward. So I think it does everything that we needed to do. So why don't we, if somebody wants to make a motion just as far as a contract for future hires.
So moved.
And I'll second the motion.
Under discussion.
Commissioner Wheeler?
The other thing is, and I think we can go there, I hate to vote for something without knowing what the next step is, so I kind of like them connected. And if somehow the ordinance could say that other than any contract in the future has to come in front of the commission for approval, if that was added to the ordinance, and the commission, because we're the ones that reap that.
I like that.
Firefly too when we pay out these things. And I think that we should be able to decide. We decide Mr. Plakowicz's and Mr. Baird's contract. I think if they want a contract with somebody on an annual basis or whatever, it should be approved by the commission. And anytime you go outside of property rights. I don't know how to word it or how you do it, but my intent is to get this under control instead of out of hand. And my compromise is the fact that I'm respecting what past commissions have done. Mm-hmm. So I just want to know where we're going. I don't have a problem with what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, and I can support that, but
You want the board to approve a contract for every new hire?
No, if they...
Because I don't see this coming back to us every year on the renewal date, and we get in the same point we are now where somebody has vested some rights, and then some board 4 years from now says, no, we're going to change all that. I think if it's the annual renewable, we ought to stick with what
with the current employees.
And also going forward, a new hire, we would approve a new hire's contract, but after that, it's going to be annually renewable on those terms.
Yeah, on the terms that they're approved.
So you just want to approve a new hire contract.
Yeah, I probably never will, but that's...
I understand what Commissioner Wheeler is saying. I almost would rather take care of this first,
okay,
Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to vote against your motion. Just take care of what we have here in front of us.
I have a motion.
Yeah, but he's chairman. To take care of that first, and then come back and address. And in fact, it may be wise policy to even have the county attorney look at what it is that allows I'm going to say the things to be put in the attorney, whether the attorney's contracts, whether there's a provision in the ordinance that allows for severance or exactly what it is, and come back with that on another day after I take care of what's in front of us.
Why are you going to oppose this?
Because if I heard him correct, is that the new hires would have this severance.
Not my understanding. Am I wrong?
Yes,
that's what I heard.
Not talking about the two current employees.
No, new hires.
New hires.
Just a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now.
I'm not in favor of that.
No, before you were, so what changed?
No, I was in favor of this for the existing employees. Whenever Commissioner brought that up, I favor exactly what you're talking about. But whenever you talk about new hires and being able to offer this, I don't know how many people can get this, as a matter of fact. And that's another thing that concerns me about it. How many people are entitled to a contract, whether we approve it or not?
Listen, I can tell you, I don't want contracts. I want property rights. And the only reason I'm compromising on this is because it's been set forward by another commission.
My point.
That's where I'm at, and I'm glad I asked.
I don't think I can add another a contract for an employee without first coming to you. Well, I just don't have the ability. Number one, my ability to enter a contract with an employee. For instance, the assistance one came to the board when he was hired. I don't think we would. I think you need to make a motion that we can't have employment contracts without it going in front of the board. That's an easy motion. Do that.
So moved. Well, but we've got a motion on the floor.
Is there some way? What if we? I'm trying to figure out a way to simplify this.
Go ahead.
Change the ordinance to say that these contracts and these two employees are grandfathered in. Change the
with this language.
With this language, but just them. Nobody after them.
Right.
Well, what you could do, as I understand it, Jim, help me on this a little bit, but basically every employee in the county, with very few exceptions, is subject to the administrative policy. Is that right?
There's 4 exceptions.
Okay.
5. I'm sorry, 5.
Okay.
County administrator, county attorney, deputy county attorney, deputy or assistant county administrator, and associate attorneys.
Yeah. And I would think if you're looking for protection, you've got that policy that applies to just about everyone else. You could require that anytime anytime we're proposing to enter into a contract different from the administrative policy, anytime someone might not be subject to the administrative policy but might have a contract, that the county commission approved that contract.
I understand that, but we have those individuals that are under the administrative policy that got contracts that I'm not happy, that I think were a little more lucrative than they should be. Is that correct? Those 5 individuals you mentioned?
They're all under contract.
Yeah, but we're not under the administrative policy. That's the point. If they're under the administrative policy, the policy governs them and you don't need to get involved. If they have a contract which takes them out of the administrative policy and now they're governed by the contract, those may be the instances in which you want to be involved.
I need this taken out of abstract form. Who is under the administrative policy that has a contract?
Everybody, but nobody.
Well, actually, we follow the same administrative policy unless a contract is different. We have the same rules we have the same rules unless our contract specifies something different.
And the only 5 people to whom that applies are the ones that he mentioned: county administrator, county attorney, 2 assistants, and the deputy.
Well, why don't you just make a motion that any future contracts for employees have to come to the board? I'd like you to make one exception. I have coaches, I have referees that we have to enter those little contracts for $6 an hour, or $8 to referee. We do those. I mean, there's not much to those.
I'm not interested in approving those.
And from time to time, we'll bring on an employee through a personnel plus, which is technically a contract, but I think the intent of what we're talking about is entering into an employment contract with one of these members.
We need an ordinance that takes the ordinance. The ordinance now directs the assistants to have a contract.
Or allows it.
Correct. It
says
it says they shall be at-will contract employees.
Right. And I like that. I don't want to change that at all. I think that's important exactly for what Mr. Plekwich said.
You can't have at-will without a contract.
I know, but you can give them a 30-day or something a whole lot. I mean, a contract doesn't. In fact, you can give them 0 severance and still have a contract and make it at-will. So yes, you can. You can have an at-will with no severance, and the contract is what the contract is.
So I think what a couple of y'all are saying is basically every contract that comes before us may be under new terms, because it doesn't sound like you want to approve these contracts as a template going forward. And I think then you'll end up with one person will get a contract approved under a certain term, and 2 years later a similar person will get a contract under different terms. Then it becomes a very political process. I don't know. I just think let's come with a template we all agree on for future hires. We can still approve that, if we want to. But I think if we approve the template, then we've approved the contract term, and then we can come back and talk about the existing employees and what we want to do there.
If you name the employees and say they're grandfathered in because we're changing the ordinance.
I don't think we have to change the ordinance.
Well, I want the ordinance changed because it says they have to be at will. And I don't know that it's necessary for them to be at will. And in this contract, they've still got property rights. And if they, we have 2 contracts. And you pointed out other things too, Wesley, with the senior management thing and so on and so forth. I'll tell you where I'm at. I'll support these 2 contracts, and because there is a compromise on both sides right here, out of respect, previous commission, the fact that the 2 attorneys are compromising by reducing the contract, and I'll grandfather them in. But I do not want, personally, I don't want an ordinance that says they're at will or we got to have a contract with them.
That's why I'm not in favor of the motion. I'd like to go ahead and take care of this, and I'd like to go ahead and throw in the assistant county administrator in this also, so we can take care of I would say, a situation that previous policies have created. And then let's try to get some consensus moving forward from this board as far as how to handle future hires. That's what I'd like to do also. That's why I'm not in favor of the motion at this point. And ready for the question.
Okay. So, Commissioner Sawyer, your motion was to accept these contracts as presented for future hires. Is that correct?
That was the second motion, to use it, yes.
Okay, and I second that. We'll go ahead and proceed to vote on that motion. All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
Motion fails with Commissioner Flesher, Davis, and...
In that case, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion right now.
Okay.
And that is directed at just the 2 attorneys who are presently in the office to essentially cap the severance to where it is today, or the greater of where it is today.
Where is under the new contract?
or under the new contract is in this packet.
Repeat that, or Mr. Chairman.
Where it is today, or
They got more today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ones who have more today, where it is, or, okay, where it is today. So, in other words, for Mr. Brawl, he'll have what he has today, but no more going forward, and Mr. Glenn will have what he has today, but no more going forward.
That's about 90,000 and 25,000 respectively?
Whatever it is.
All right, so what you're saying is we're going to take this contract that's in front of us, and under Section 10 severance, it'll specifically state that the deputy county attorney is entitled to a maximum of 7 months severance pay, and the assistant county attorney is capped at a maximum of 3 months severance pay. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay,
If you're going to second it, I'll wait until we vote it down, then I'll make a motion.
I thought that's what you said you would go along with. Yeah.
See, now you're seeing why I didn't try to figure out what you wanted and try to...
Yeah, too many egos up here to deal with.
We'll let that motion die then for lack of second. Commissioner Wheeler, what would you like to propose?
Let me try. I would propose that we approve the contracts as offered by Mr. Polakowicz today. It's a new contract. Has less severance and so on and so forth. And as I said, I think it's a compromise between the attorneys that are currently here have a contract. This reduces our liability with their contract. So I'd call that, I don't know how to do it, a grandfathering in of those two individuals and their contracts, and to change the ordinance that requires them to be at-will employees.
And change the ordinance?
Yeah, the ordinance right now needs to be addressed. Now, or I can
For these employees?
do it in 2 motions. No, I can do it in 2 motions.
Thank you.
One is to approve this.
Thank you.
I can tell you as assistant, in my position, if I hire an assistant, I want to be at will. I mean, you're tying hands.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's my opinion on it.
Well, we'll get into that next.
Yes, let's go ahead and...
Commissioner, when you say grandfather, do you mean that they continue to accrue a month of severance up to the 12-month maximum?
No. This contract, and for maybe grandfather's the wrong point because we haven't changed the ordinance yet.
Right.
Yeah, don't worry about the ordinance.
Okay.
Talk about the contract.
Okay, I will make a motion to approve Mr. Polakowicz's contracts with his 2 attorneys.
I'll second that.
Okay, for discussion?
Yeah, and again, how much severance are they each getting? Because that
up to 4 months for the deputy and 3 months for the assistant.
Yeah.
As written in Section 10.
And that's up to.
So you're looking at about 50,000 and 35,000, right?
Keep in mind when you keep in mind you keep looking at that, but if they say they don't want that, you're going to pay it anyway.
Pay
you
more.
Reach their contract.
Under Mr. DeBraw, we're paying more. Paying 6 months. Up, and then if...
These reduce our liability.
Yes.
And the county attorney's liability is $13,000. Deputy assistant's liability is $50,000. And another attorney's liability, or our liability for that attorney is about $35,000.
We ought to change the policy. That's after.
I know, but
as we thought you were.
We're moving forward. I mean, Counsel, I think you sold yourself short, but I'm glad you did because you had unanimous support on that, and I think you set the bar in the right direction. And it's unfortunate today that we're looking at this balance, whether we're taking something away from an employee or not, while we are all thinking about and considering, if I hear correctly, that we would like to change the code. If we want to change the code, then why are we placing ourselves in this position where we're willing to write a check at discretion?
I'm willing to do it. I can answer that question.
To me, that we're willing to
right now.
cap our future liability.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it because right now we're looking at 1 month of severance for every year of service, so up to 12 months. And so if we've got everybody on the same page to be able to reduce that down from $150,000 for a severance package down to $50,000, I'm ready to do that today and then address the policy to see to that doesn't happen again.
Well, why can't we reduce it down to the number closer to where the county attorney is?
We can try that if you want to, but we've got everybody.
I don't know. We all have a motion there. You might have everybody agreeing to this.
Well, I'm talking about not just up here.
It would be
the other
nice.
side of the contracts.
Let me go back. Commissioner Wheeler, your motion was to apply these contracts as written, and the county attorney will offer these to the deputy and to the assistant.
Correct. And one of the reasons for that is in rebuttal of Commissioner Fletcher's thinking, and I understand where he's coming from. I don't oppose that line of thinking, but I also think that we have a sense of fairness. And also, I've been working for the last 5 years with these two attorneys, or a little less with Mr. Glenn. I think we've got two good attorneys and two assistant attorneys, and I don't see this being exercised, and I don't see us paying a severance payout. Obviously, I could be wrong in the future, but as you said earlier, you don't do business based on a crisis every year. I think that applies here because I know the personnel, I'm happy with them, I've got confidence in them. So,
okay, did you second?
I did.
As do I, and this is not a personal reflection at all on performance or the ability to represent. It's just. It comes down to dollars and cents. I think that Alan Polakowicz set the bar early on with his contract, and I'd like to see it go in that direction.
I agree. And after this motion, I'm ready to amend the policy.
Chairman.
Mr. Bill.
Commissioner Davis, just to be sure, I'm not asking for my next contract that comes due in September, October to continue with the 1 month severance per year.
That's why I'm in favor of this.
I'm happy with capping it at the 6.5 or 7 months or whatever it is that I've already accrued, that I've already bargained for, and that's already been.
So that motion does not grant that.
Your motion does not grandfather me in for using that.
No,
I would take less if I would
That's correct.
So you understand that?
Yeah, that's where I am with it.
All right. All right, so we have a motion to apply these contracts to the current assistant and deputy as they're presented. Commissioner Wheeler made the motion, second from Commissioner Davis. We'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor at this point signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign?
Aye.
That motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Fletcher opposed. Now, did you have additional on this item?
Now, I'm not ready.
Try this one, Mike.
Okay, I will. What I'd like to do is I'd like to bring back the policy as far as looking at things that the county administrator, the county attorney can give to contract employees that would typically not, that would may or may not come before us.
Just make a motion that we can't offer without coming in front of you.
I like that, but I also think that the issue of the parity, as far as Commissioner O'Brien mentioned earlier, I think that, you coming before us and saying, man, I've got just the best thing since sliced bread in this assistant county administrator, and we grant them something more perhaps than what we've just given or offered somewhere else. I like some issue of parity, some kind of a box that we're going to put this in front of, and then I'd like to approve it after that to make sure that, yes, I agree with it. But I'm not ready to make that whole policy decision today. I'd like for y'all to come back and be able to and tell us, hey, this is what we think is sound policy. Yes.
Why don't we put this, move this portion to our next agenda, either next week or even the first meeting in May, and give us some time. I'd like to sit down with Alan, and I'd like to look at this, and maybe, if we all do our homework, maybe we come back with something collectively that works, instead of trying to figure this whole thing out right now.
Absolutely. That's why I would we need to move this off center somewhere, but I'm not ready to make a decision on it today.
We need a motion to move this to the first meeting and say in first or second meeting in May. We've got time because we're not hiring anybody right now, so we've got time to work on it.
I'll be happy to make that motion for you, Commissioner.
Second it.
All right, so Commissioner Slaughter and Commissioner Wheeler to have staff come back with basically a contract policy review. Let's just say the second meeting in May. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you. I just want to add, I know for the deputy attorney and the assistant attorney, this is given up some. I know that they're going to have to make a decision whether they accept this or not. It's my deep belief that I hope that they both accept this and understand the board is having to make some tough decisions now in light of the budget. There's been a lot of employees whose positions have been eliminated, and they kind of gave the ultimate give back. But I do appreciate everything they've both done. I hope they make the determination to stay with the county and to continue to serve the public. At the same time, I respect the fact they have to make some decisions, and whatever they make, I'm sure will be in their best interest. But it'd be my preference that they choose to accept this and stay working with the county.
I'll second that. Even though it's not a motion.
Yeah, I can't make motions. Mr. Paladin?
Yes, I'm going to refrain from making comments, except I'd like to have a little clarity on what we just voted on. Commissioner Wheeler, you said that out of fairness, you wanted Bill DeBraw's and George Glenn's contract not to go backwards. No, let me just finish.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought you were leaning in the direction to honor Bill DeBraw's 6.5 month. You weren't?
No.
Okay. I totally misunderstood you then, and I apologize for that. I just totally misunderstood you. I thought that's where you were headed.
No, in fact, the reason I supported the contract is because Mr. DeBraw mentioned he was going backwards, and I gave credence to that and said that I would compromise and reduce his severance with this new contract. I was under the impression that the attorneys had probably, or I assume the attorneys had probably already agreed to these contracts. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's irrelevant at this point anyway.
Okay, I didn't understand it. The only other quick comment I'd like to make is that we hired Alan Plakowicz. With his reputation and with his ability, I'm sure he's not concerned about hanging his shingle anywhere with 30 days notice, and at his stage in life, like he said. And the motion that Commissioner Solari made and the explanation that Commissioner O'Brien gave is exactly where my mind was. I thought both of those made sense. If we're going to handcuff our new attorney that we hired as the county attorney as to where his negotiating procedures are in hiring people and firing people, I think we got to give him that leeway in order to run his department the way we hired him to run it. And if we hire another attorney, then we got to give him the leeway to do that. But I have total confidence in Mr. Plakowicz needing that ability to run his department the way we want him to run it. So I would just say as a comment, I agree with Mr. Solari and Mr. O'Brien 100% on the way they were going. And I just would like to see us give Mr. Plakowicz that feeling of security when you talk with him.
I think we did. I think we did.
He's talking about the new hires, and I understand what you're saying. I would rather look at it more in the terms and the times, during the times versus the terms, and address that with a salary based on what we're getting versus a perk that may be a long unfunded liability. And I think that's being more genuine with the taxpayers instead of to put it on the inside of a package. And I'll go ahead and make a venture that in the event that everybody agrees to this package, I would submit to you probably that Mr. Glenn and Mr. DeBraw will never invoke this part that we spent so much even talking about. That's assuming they accept this.
I agree.
And I probably agree with that.
But in fairness to the taxpayers, if there's something that we need to negotiate, I'd rather negotiate it with a salary versus something that is a pie in the sky that may or may not be invoked later on down the road with some fine print.
And the only place I was going, I just would like to give the confidence level to Mr. Plakowicz so we have the confidence in him running the department the way we hired him. And if he's talking to another attorney he's going to hire, it'd be kind of difficult to put him in a position. Yeah, well, I can agree to what we're talking about. I'm going to hire you with this contract or whatever, but I have to get it approved. So it really reduces his leverages in his hiring and firing, and I would like to see that happen, in my opinion.
Thank you. That takes us to the next county attorney matters, item C, whether to prepare a proposed economic development tax exemption ordinance in advance of the November 2010 referendum, memorandum dated April 7th, 2010. Mr. Plakowicz, you're still with us, right?
I'm earning my money today, right? Last week you voted to hold a referendum on the economic development tax exemption issue. To hold that referendum in November. One question that has lingered during the discussion up till now is whether or not you want to actually adopt or tentatively adopt or something, but in any event, direct staff to prepare an ordinance of the type that you would intend to implement if the referendum is favorable. The idea being that while people are asked to vote on the referendum, it would give them an additional level of information as to exactly what they're voting on. That I told you last week that I would come back this week with that question, and here we are. I did sit down and talk with certain members of staff, both within the legal department and outside, and it's somewhat subjective, but we thought it was a good idea to prepare that ordinance in the interest of voter information. I certainly wanted to let you know that if you agree with that, staff is certainly prepared to spend the time and prepare that ordinance for you. I know that the amount of staff time it would take might be of concern to you, but it is not really a concern to staff. Staff is prepared to do that.
I'll move that we do that.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler and a second from Commissioner Fletcher for staff recommendation, which is to prepare the proposed economic development tax exemption ordinance. Is there any further discussion?
No,
Commissioner, sorry.
I'd just like to add that we don't want this coming back under the consent agenda. No, seriously, I think this is the type of thing that we ought to discuss once or twice here.
Yeah, it'll take some massaging.
Make it a part of the process. I think this is the best thing we can do and the most honest thing we can do for the citizens, to let them be part of the process of seeing what they would have to pay for.
It'll come back under the county attorney's matters, and we'll have discussion.
Not only that, I would foresee that if this moves forward and there's support of the commission to move forward, that probably individuals in this community that believe in it are going to be out promoting it, and they've got something to promote rather than a pie in the sky. So I think it'll get a lot of exposure between now and November.
Sounds good. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to commissioner items under my matters. Item A is just an update from when I was up in Tallahassee at the end of March with the Florida Association of Counties Conference. In your backup, the FAC, in cooperation with and in support with the Florida League of Cities, presented what we're calling the Local Savings Act. And this was, we had a televised press conference on the steps of the old Capitol, and basically it outlines about 11 or 12 unfunded mandates that the state passes down to the local municipalities, and it talks about the multiple hundreds of millions of dollars of impacts to our budget from these state mandates. In addition to this, on consent, we had a budget resolution where there was a $56,000 reconciliation from the Juvenile Justice Department of Juvenile Justice, and then another $13,000. And now I understand there's a third one coming up back to us, another $13,000. And I'm going to suggest when that comes back up that we not pay it and we kick it back to the state and at least make them aware of these unfunded mandates. But this Local Savings Act highlighted several $100 million that we could be using in our budgets for local services that are unfunded mandates down to the local level. And that's just for your information. There's no action on that one. My second item, a couple of meetings ago, I had appointed Commissioner Slary to be the county representative on the canvassing board. Good plan. Yeah. Subsequent to that appointment, it came to light that Commissioner Slary is actively involved in a candidate's campaign, and therefore that makes him ineligible to serve on the canvassing board. So what I would ask is someone make a motion that we need to retract the appointment to the county canvassing board. So moved. Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher will move it, and I'll second that. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
I called the county attorney on this to ask exactly what is an active candidate, and being a co-chair for an event of a candidate that's going to be on the ballot, I'm assuming that because I have given money to candidates' campaigns, he said that wasn't enough, and so I don't know. I really, what I'm looking for right now before we remove him, has in fact the county attorney deemed it to be that he is actively involved in a candidate's campaign.
The supervisor elections, we did ask Kay Clem, and she did say this would be...
what was it?
I don't have that. I'm sorry, that was an email she sent. But she did say that he would have to be retracted now that he could not serve.
Okay.
Because hosting a fundraiser is a more active step in the process.
I don't know. Okay, I'll go ahead and do that, and I will. But I don't know that there's anybody that's not running for election that hasn't done something like that this year. I think we have a problem here.
Well, you're correct. What I'll have to do now at this point is I'll send a letter to Judge Levin and ask him to appoint another judge to serve on the canvassing board.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get the 3 on there. It's just, it can't be, 2 of us are in a contested election, and the other 3 are actively supporting various candidates.
I'm ready for the question.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you. Is there any further business to conduct today?
Just real quick before we do, are you needing us, in order for this to go to the judge, are you just going to say, Judge, that the other 3 commissioners that are not contested have hosted or been on the committees to host fundraisers for contested elections?
I'll send a letter to the judge stating that none of the open county commissioners are available to serve.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you.